It's Thursday, so that means Dr. Mike is here to fix your life and your lineup.
Prey on their desperation. That's my advice as a psychologist. Prey on the desperation of others.
You totally need that plaque in your office, Dr. Mike.
Moving Wisconsin forward, one joke at a time. This is Kristen Bry with As Goes Wisconsin.
Yada, yada, yada.
Hello, Wisconsin!
Hello, Wisconsin. Hello, Wausau, Wisconsin Rapids, Oshkosh, Amory, Richland Center, our home base of Waukesha, Madison Tonight, Jane Matnair right now. How are you, my friend?
I am fantastic. It is Thursday. One of our favorite people, Dr. Mike, is going to be here at 11:30. So I love talking to him.
You do love talking to him. I mean, I love talking to him too because he has been my best friend for 15 years. But it is fun to be able to have him on the show every week. And so at 11:30, get your questions ready for either your career, love life, mental health, but also your fantasy football lineup.
Equally important.
Equally important, especially to your pocketbook potentially. Dr. Mike fixes your life and your lineup. That is happening at 11:30, 844-967-2789. And then at 12:30, we're talking to a different kind of doctor, one who is an MD instead of a PhD. Dr. Scott Saunders is joining us to talk about the rarity of addiction specialists in hospitals.
This is a surprise.
Is it?
I guess because we have talked so much more about addiction in the last 15 years, you would think that this would be something that would be part of our system of health already.
Yeah. And so basically this is a story that there are few, despite all the kinds of different kinds of specialists that are usually employed by a hospital, addiction specialist is not one of them. Whereas Dr. Scott Saunders is an internal medicine hospitalist who recently got added on a certification in addiction. So we're going to talk about the importance of that and what training is missing from med school, the importance of this, and also just the difference between treating addiction as a disease that deserves treatment versus a moral failing.
As a character flaw.
Yes. And so that's coming up at 12:30. At 1 p.m., we had legend John McGivern on Tuesday, and now we have a different Milwaukee legend, John Gerda, writer, historian, joining us at 1 p.m. today. And I'm so excited because he's announced amongst multiple retiring, I guess you could say,
Big
from
names.
Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, George Stanley, David Haynes, and also John Gerda is hanging it up for his 29-year run as a historian columnist for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which is a long time.
It is a long time. He wrote one of my favorite books of all time, The Making of Milwaukee.
Which is also a documentary, right?
Yes, it is. The book is incredible. Some of the pictures, I still want to get a copy from the Milwaukee Historical Society. There's a tall ship going down the river on Water Street. And it's, from like the 1880s.
Yeah.
And it's just such a throwback. It's a wonderful, I've given many as Christmas gifts.
Yes. And so so this is my first time talking to him. So I'm so excited to have him on the show. And the variety of questions from his history to Milwaukee's history to Wisconsin's history, he will be a treasure trove of stories, I imagine. And then at the end of the show, we're going to talk to for the Waupun, right?
Yes.
And so the first of many highlighting of Christmas shows that are coming across Wisconsin. So the Cowsills.
The Cowsills. Now, you're not going to remember that.
No, I looked this up and I was like, oh, this feels like something I should know, but don't know. The Cowsills Family Christmas.
Yeah, they were very along the lines of Peter, Paul, and Mary, very folksy when folk music was big, probably in the early 60s, early 70s. I have memories of them.
Okay, and it's Wautoma, not Waupun.
It's Wautoma, yes.
And it's the show is this Saturday at December 10th at 7 p.m. in Wautoma. Cowsills Family Christmas. So we will talk to Vicky Poshell.
I believe so.
We'll ask her how to pronounce her name.
We'll just call her Vic.
Vic. But to start off with today's show, the story that caught my eye is, I don't think I'm being mean when I say that Republicans have a reputation or even take pride in being cheap. being frugal. I am a fiscal conservative.
Watching
we need
pennies.
to watch spending. And that is, often part of their platform. But it was news to me that the Wisconsin GOP does not pay their chairman. It's a volunteer role, which I just found out because the conversation is now shifted to, should we make this a paid position?
Since the red wave didn't happen?
Kind of, yeah. So this was a conversation. So it's been apparently in the last, they're now going to pick their third chairman because Paul Farrow, who is also the Waukesha County executive, has said that he is not going to renew or not going to try to be the chairman again, even though he had been the Wisconsin GOP chairman, I think, since 2019. Or when did he take it over? I might have gotten that name, that year wrong. But he has said, I'm going to focus on being reelected as county executive for Waukesha instead of continuing to chair Wisconsin GOP. And so now the conversation, I guess, has shifted to, should we pay this person? And I would say, yeah, if, because it doesn't, doing that job, which feels like if you're going to do it well, would take a lot of work. And just doing it as a volunteer position feels, I'm just shocked that they've done as well as they've done, having the person being in charge of the party, have to have a different full-time job, because unless they're independently wealthy, to take on a non-paid position that requires as much work as, I'm much more familiar with Ben Wickler and the Democratic Party. And in this story by Lawrence Andrea of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Ben Wickler gets paid well. Let's just put it that way. They printed his
salary.
Yeah.
Should I take a guess?
Take a guess. It's printed, so I don't feel like, it's funny to have that feeling of, we don't talk about our salaries pop up, but it's like it's in the journal. It's in the Journal-Sentinel, so I'm like, I guess we could talk about it.
How about 120?
More.
160.
More.
Wow.
Yeah.
180.
More.
2.
A little less.
190.
A little more.
195.
A little more.
198.
There you go.
I'm applying for the GOP job.
Well, that's not what the GOP pays.
What?
GOP pays zero.
Zippo.
Ben Wickler, who is the chairman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and has done, the outpacing of the fundraising that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin has done compared to the Wisconsin GOP. And I think that is why this conversation is starting to happen, is should this be a position that we pony up and pay for so someone can do it full time?
Well, and you know better than I, but I mean, this position involves fundraising, right? Campaigning.
Totally.
It kind of oversees everything that's going on in the state for the state party.
Yes. I mean, as far as I understand, I've never worked for either party. And so this is my knowledge is insofar as I can read about it and, learn what people say that they do. But I think it is, I'm sure it is strategy. I'm sure it's part of it is also the recruitment of candidates and training of candidates. But it's a lot, I would imagine, the fundraising and just being on the phone and relationships and donors and all of that. And I'm sure it's, if you're a political animal, like I'm sure it's a very fun job regardless of the party. But it's just wild. I guess I just assumed, because who would want to do that job for free?
And as you said, have another full-time position.
And have another full-time position.
And that is a very critically important role.
Yeah. I mean, especially in a state like ours, where it is so close so often, at least on statewide elections. And I think that is why this has been raised, is because it was the red wave that wasn't. Obviously, there's still a dominant majority in the state legislature for reasons that we talk about often, of being gerrymandering. But in the statewide offices, obviously Ron Johnson and this treasurer were the only Republicans that won. And even Ron Johnson's race was the closest Senate race, I think they said in like 100 years, as far as how close it was between Mandela and Ron Johnson was there. While governor has typically been very close and presidents have been even closer, I guess the Senate races have not been as close as this one was. And so the question becomes, what do the Republicans, what do we need to do better? And one of the things that's getting thrown out there is maybe we should pay people to do this job.
Well, all I can think of is how Ben Wickler for the Democrats managed to put together the cast of Princess Bride, the cast of Veep, the cast, of West Wing. So whoever's going to step into this role for Wisconsin Republicans, you need to figure out a good table read for Kevin Sorbo, John Waite, and Chachi.
Joni loves Chachi.
Yeah.
So it looks like the people who are the executive committee is scheduled to meet this coming Saturday to consider the successor of outgoing chairman Paul Farrow. So I'm less familiar with these names, but I guess it's Brian Schimming, who is a at-large member of the party's executive committee, Jesse Garza, who is the third vice chairman, and Ben Vogel, who was a campaign aide to Johnson and had a limited run, I think, for lieutenant governor, but I think he might have dropped out even before the primary happened in August. But I don't know. It's just interesting to be in one way, like I said, in one way, it's like, oh, of course they don't. But also strategy wise, you probably should.
Are these paid in all other states? I mean, or is it just...
That's a good question.
Is it just a state by state thing?
I don't know. But if you're listening right now and you have thoughts on this, 844-967-2789, or I guess what job would you do for free?
And there are some.
Are there? I guess it depends on how much money you make from your full-time job. Because I feel like when you sit on boards, don't you get paid to be on boards a lot of the times? Or are those all volunteer positions?
Not necessarily.
See, I've never sat on a board. You've sat on a board, right?
I have. And for at least the nonprofits that I've been on the boards of, no, these are not paid.
All right. Well, we're going to keep talking about this when we come back. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Join the conversation, 844-967-2789, and we'll be right back.
It's easy to listen to your favorite local radio station anytime. Download the Civic Media app from the Apple or Google Play Store, then listen live or whenever you want from anywhere for free.
Warning, listening to the Devil's Advocates may expose you to opposing views.
It's scary. Maybe I'm coming a little bit more over the left, but...
Well, it's not left. It's good governance, Steve.
It's good to be exposed to different ideas, and I do appreciate that you do put that out there on the airways, because a lot of the times where you just get a little soundbite of this or a little bit of that, and that's the end of it. You're to be commended for that.
Dave, I'm glad you finally come around to commending the greatest radio show ever, man.
Follow the Devil's Advocates on Facebook and Twitter.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
You are never far away from your favorite radio station. We're always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app. And if you missed your favorite show or game, listen to a podcast of it anytime on the app or our website, civicmedia.us.
Here's your updated forecast on the Shaw. High temperatures reach up to 37 this afternoon under overcast skies. Winds out of the east, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected again tonight. Lows dip down to about 30. A mixture of precipitation likely tomorrow. Daytime highs approaching 35. Cloudy skies expected. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow through tomorrow night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
A progressive voice from Manitowoc to Janesville. WAUK 540 AM. Always streaming at WAUKradio.com.
I was out, I was down, I was never around when she got inside my head.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. As always, you can join the conversation, 844-967-2789. Speaking of which, do we have a text?
We do. Wes from Middleton checking in about what job would you do for free from the 608. And Wes says, I would do those duck boat tours in the Dells.
That's a good one.
It is a good one. That would be a fun job.
I knew, when I was doing improv and stuff in New York, there's a fair amount of comedians, improvisers who their day job when they're not performing, they're still kind of performing because they're tour guides in one way, either like on a bus or a walking tour. And it, they're very funny and be able to play with that and like they get paid, but that's a good one. That's a really good one of just getting free, getting the ride, getting up that duck boat each day.
You get to drive and tell stories and make people laugh. I think that's a great idea.
That's a great idea. Thank you for the text. I'm trying. So we were talking about what job would you do for free? What hard job would you do for free? Because I guess I don't know why I would have assumed that this was a paid position, but apparently right now the Wisconsin Republicans are debating whether or not the chairman of the WIS GOP,
which has a lot of responsibility,
should remain a volunteer position as opposed to the Wisconsin Democrats who pay their chairman, as far as Wisconsin salaries go, very well. And I think you've seen the difference. And granted, like I said, this is a 50-50 state, and it's not like this is because of they're paying Ben Wickler that Democrats are just dominating the state. But in the last couple years, the fundraising edge for Democrats over Republicans is not insignificant. And so in election reports show that Wisconsin Democrats raised about $55.3 million in its state's state and federal accounts compared to Republicans' $22.1 million in 2021 alone. And that's double, right? And so it will be interesting. They're meeting this Saturday. They being the Wisconsin Republicans, they have their executive committee meeting. And this is one of the things on the docket, along with who will take over for Paul Farrow, who is stepping down to focus on getting reelected as the Waukesha County executive. And it's just because it just seems like to do that job well, it feels like something that is full time.
Absolutely.
And who has the organizational and energy levels to do both a full-time job and be in charge of a very competitive a party in a very competitive state. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I can't help but laugh of just being like, of course you guys don't pay your chairman.
What baffles me is the amount of money that was spent in this last election is truly mind-boggling. And for some of I can think of 3 top GOP donors where $200,000 is lunch money to pay someone's salary. That's nothing.
Yeah, that is true. It's like, what?
Come on.
Well, it also makes me come back and think of, I always come this push and pull of like the state legislature and how much state senators or state assembly reps make
for their part-time job.
Well, because it's supposed to be a full-time job. Yeah. So I think it's somewhere, I forgot exactly the difference between, but it's around 50. It's more than 50K, but it's
under 60.
Under 60. I mean, it's one of those things where in Milwaukee, aldermen make significantly more for the Common Council in Milwaukee than people who work in the state legislature. And the frustration, I think, that as taxpayers, as voters, as constituents, we have when they gavel out for the year in election years, and you're like, well, you're still getting a paycheck to literally not do anything.
Yes.
and just campaign. And so then the conversation becomes, well, should they get paid as a part-time job? But then that keeps people who are not
wealthy,
sometimes real estate agents, commercial real estate people, a lot of the people who often end up running already have other jobs. And so it's like, this is either going to be a job that should be treated as full-time if it's getting a full-time wage or not. And there's pros and cons to each. And so I guess if I was a Republican, if I was invested in the Republican Party, I don't really understand the reason why you would want to keep this as a volunteer position, considering how competitive everything is. And at least the track record, largely since Ben Wickler, I think, took over the party for the Democrats, the track record for statewide office for Democrats over Republicans is pretty strong in the last
couple
years. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what comes from this. But
and then do we know if they're going to decide for certain this weekend?
I don't know.
Just
I think they have a meeting this weekend, and so it's like, I think this is. It sounds like this is on the table as far as, should this be a paid position? I guess, how would we pay for it, and also who is in the running to take over that position. And so
I shouldn't get my resume ready.
No, I would, because I need you.
I will.
I need you here. You don't have time for that.
I'd be able to squeeze in both for $198,000 a year.
That's true. Maybe I'd do it for $198,000. And so, but yeah, it's just an interesting question of what do you love enough to make time for when it's this big of a responsibility. And so, pretty interesting stuff. We'll keep you posted on that. But for now, we're going to go to another break. And when we come back, Dr. Mike is going to be here to fix your life and your lineup. If you have questions for him, 844-967-2789. Stick around. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
The Shaw 101 FM, your fix for progressive talk. From Butler to Wind Lake. Always streaming at WAUKradio.com.
Fear you may be missing out? We're always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app. Enjoy listening live or catch up by finding the podcast at civicmedia.us or wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.
Pat, I feel like all the women we have on our show, like our co-hosts, always get too famous for us. And then
I would just like to think that we are fertile ground from which they can blossom. We are the manure from which they spring.
The manure from which they spring. I was going to say holding fort, but I think your metaphor is way better.
Up North News Radio with Pat Krylo airs at its new time from 6 to 8 a.m. weekdays across Civic Media.
We stand on the shoulders of women who came before us.
Women who fought for their own financial futures.
And now it's our turn.
Join us. Visit WeSaySaveIt.org and take control of your financial future by saving for retirement.
I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. The most prominent American being held overseas has been freed.
Welcome home, Brittany.
President Biden says Russia has released basketball star Brittany.
Good morning.
She's on a plane. She's on her way home.
Good morning. We can continue to talk about pay stuff if you want to too. I love that talk about like what should we do for free? What should we get paid for? So
okay, we can start. I'll introduce you, and then we can just be like, do you have thoughts on what we were just talking about? And then I see your questions. We'll do my fantasy team. Michael has emailed some questions, but he's going to be Rick from Baraboo.
Great.
Those are some football questions. So we'll just sprinkle it in, and then we'll have, per usual, we'll have some fun. We'll fly by.
We are not
Good.
giving up.
I love that you put the the salary. You just said the salary. People should talk more about that sort of stuff. That's how they get you. If there's nobody knows what anybody makes, that we assume that if you want like an extra dollar, you're being greedy. You're not. Whoever's paying you.
No, I know, and it's when they printed it like in there, I was like, huh.
With it.
That's well, one, it's a lot of money, but also he does a really good job and he works really hard, and so it's not that he doesn't deserve it. But it's also like in like the Midwest niceness of it all. It's like, oh, like now we all know what Ben Wickler meant.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, our niceties.
Satisfaction rate.
Totally, yeah.
MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan.
All right, well,
MediShare works
keep it rolling.
for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
For Civic Media, I'm Jane Matnier with your headlines. It's been a good year for Wisconsin. The state dipping below 3% unemployment in the last 12 months. The current rate 3.3%. But a worker shortage still projected in the coming years. Amy Pekacek, Secretary Designee for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, tells the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel there are roughly 2 job openings for every job seeker in the state. So Wisconsin trying to re-engage people who've been out of the workforce for a number of reasons, including incarceration. There are currently 10 job centers and correctional facilities helping inmates get employment once they're released. Richland Center community members frustrated with the proposed closing of the UW Richland campus. Supporters say some of the reasons for declining enrollment are due to the UW system's lack of financial support, drastic reductions in faculty and staff, and no marketing or strategic plans. They'll forward a petition to Governor Evers, UW system president Jay Rothman, and area lawmakers. You're listening to The Shaw, 101 FM, WAUK, 540 AM.
Is your love life a fantasy? Having issues with your fantasy football roster? Helping with football and your love life? Here's your new best friend, Dr. Mike.
Because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
So live your life. You steady dressing up that car, just live your life.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. If you miss any part of today's show, you can always listen to the podcast, which you can find at asgoeswisconsin.com/listen, and wherever you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all the places. And you can always join the conversation at 844-967-2789, including right now, especially right now, because it is our weekly segment with Dr. Michael McCutcheon, who is a psychologist, executive coach, and who specializes in career achievement and life satisfaction. He's been featured on NPR and the New York Post and Washington Post, and he teaches counseling at New York University. And he, every week helps us tackle topics like work and love and fitness and financial goals. And he also loves to help people make easy money on DraftKings and FanDuel. And so he also happens to be my best friend of 15 years. So this is always a treat to get to talk to you on my show every Thursday. Welcome, Dr. Mike.
Good to see you both. How are you this morning?
We're good. We're getting through the week, getting through this holiday season. I have no idea when I'm going to do my shopping for gifts and everything, but we'll deal with that later. So in following up a little bit on our conversation we were just having, less about political parties, but is there a job you do for free? Are there jobs you do for free?
I do this for free.
That's true. You do this for free. That's true.
I love it. Yeah, and I'm on 2 boards for free, 2 nonprofit boards for free. And one takes up a bunch of time, but I think it's like if it's worth it to you, then it feels great. I mean, it feels like the reward is that work. I mean, that said, too, I do think there are other things that people probably do for free that they should get paid for. It sounds like the GOP role probably should be a paid role, but but I was thinking too, is like, how do people in politics, like they don't make so much money, right? How does that work, right? And so I was while you were talking, I was Googling, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, makes $225,000 a year, which is good money, but she's a very famous person who's working all the time and whatever. And I was like, wow, but she looks so much like, I don't know, she looks like so much like like richer than that. And I Googled, and her husband is worth $114 million, right? So that there's like, it's like, you know, those kinds of things I think kind of work themselves out. So I do think that, like you were saying before, who's allowed to take these jobs with passion, you know, for free, because they don't, you know, they're not a single mom trying to keep, you know, both food on the table and electricity, you know, running for 3 kids in the winter. It's a different situation. So that somebody like that might want to volunteer, might want to do some things that they really care about, but they don't have the means to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's probably a whole other conversation as far as different jobs, like I know for journalism, and like who gets to take those kind of meager wages, despite it being a desirable job, like career path, just because you need to make enough money to live. And sometimes there's a lot of media type jobs now that don't pay very well for a lot of different reasons. And so who gets funneled into those jobs sometimes are people who can afford because of family money,
right?
Spouse money, whatever. So
we see that a lot in colleges too, right? A lot of kids who like want to go to an internship over the summer, and it's unpaid, right? And they stay in a fine apartment, and they get to, you know, eat and do whatever because their family can pay it. And other people are like, if I don't have a job over the summer, I don't know how I'm keeping my apartment. I don't know how I'm eating. And so then these people look like they are quote unquote harder workers because they were working in the industry for free for a while, that they care more. But it's all about what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, let's do an episode on that.
Soon enough, we're not going to be able to do the football part of this segment. And so we'll have a whole half hour to fill with tons of other topics besides just the lineup. But we're going to get to my lineup in a second. But we have a first question that is kind of about lifetime management, not dissimilar to how do you volunteer for a full-time role that you'll get paid for. All right. Hey, Dr. Mike, I'm a 28-year-old woman and I'm struggling with feeling overwhelmed all the time. Same here, sister. My older sibling is dealing with the stress of a divorce. My parents are constantly worrying about something. I have a long-distance relationship that probably isn't going to work out. Meanwhile, I just got an exciting new job that I want to thrive in. I moved to a new city and want to make a community here, and I haven't been keeping up with my eating and fitness goals. Help! How can I manage all of these other people and myself all at once?
Wow. Yeah. I think a lot of people are going through a lot of this stuff.
There's definitely some things in there that I identify with. Not the long distance relationship, but
yeah. But you have had one or two of those as well. You know what that's like. And I do think that the holidays. I'm not surprised we're getting this question in December, right? I mean, I do think it's sort of like a long distance relationship. There's stress around that. You know, parents worrying about things, and the person moving to a new city. There's all this stuff that's like the compounding thing of like the end of the year and the holidays are coming up, and what am I doing with my life? Help. How do I deal with all this at the same time? Honestly, I'm going to be very surgical about this advice. We all only have so many, we'll call it so many damn to give, so many F to give, which I'm not going to say on radio. There's only so many cares that we can give, right? So think about this as you have like a bucket of 100 tokens, and everyone is a care that I can give. I can give one to Jane, I can give one to Kristen, I can give one, you know, to my puppy, I can give one to I care about these things. These things are important to me. But as soon as you start divvying them out to other people, you don't have anything left for yourself. Did you notice how the whole first half of this question was all these other people in my life, my sister, and like the long distance relationship, and my parents, and then, oh yeah, I haven't been eating very well, I haven't going to the gym, right? Because we're putting those first. So my advice to you is, you know, that might sound glib, but you really do have to give those tokens to the most important things, and the things that are, you know, that are you first. You cannot just be taking care of everybody else and assume that you're going to have any fuel left in the tank for yourself. And by the way, you know, just like your paycheck, just because you have 100 tokens doesn't mean you need to give them all out. It's good to save some sometime, right? And have a little extra fuel in the tank so that when 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock comes, you don't feel like a tired, you know, emotionally vacant zombie, right? You know, like just because you have nothing left for yourself. So, you know, I would say almost the new year, let's get it going right now. Let's focus on an eating plan now. Let's focus on some fitness now. Focus on making new friends in your new community. That's really important. And you know, Your sister's divorce is going to work itself out. Unless you're a divorce attorney, you probably can't help as much as you want. Your parents are warriors, and get in line, right? Everybody's parents are warriors. And so let them figure that stuff out. They've been doing it for decades. They'll be just fine. You need to focus on yourself first and save a little bit for yourself.
All right. Well, that is a very good answer. And I should take some of that to heart, I would say, especially Jane had to text me last night to remind me to eat something besides Skittles for dinner. So, same lifetime management question.
I shake many virtual fingers at her.
All right. Well, moving on to my fantasy football team. You'll be proud to know that your help has, I'm projected to finish second going into the playoffs as of right now for my league.
Great.
But going into this week, it looks like Pittman has a bye, so I need to switch out him. But even with that bye, it looks like I'm projected to win. So what should I focus on for this week? Or what changes should I be thinking about?
You have Josh Jacobs in, right? He's in somewhere.
No.
Is he out? Is he on your bench?
I don't think I have Josh Jacobs.
I thought you had Jacobs. I told you to get him. I mean,
there he is. Yeah, I do. Yep.
Someone
Yep. He's there. There he is.
I mean, this is the first time I'm looking at your lineup. Who's Josh Jacobs? Yeah, make sure he's in. Good. Okay, so who's so is Pittman a wide receiver, or do you have him in the flex position? Where do you have him right now?
Right now, I have him as a wide receiver.
Okay, who's on your bench wide receiver? Who are our options?
Sutton, Jefferson.
Which Jefferson?
V. Jefferson from the Rams.
Ugh. That's it.
That's it.
Okay, who's in your flex right now?
My flex right now is Ayuk. Ayuk.
Okay, maybe we move.
Ayuk.
Okay, so who do you have for running backs on your bench?
On my bench, I have Pierce, Drake, and Mixon.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay, Mixon is going into flex, and Ayuk is going into wide receiver.
Okay.
And watch on Sunday. I'll text you too. I will tell you not to eat Skittles, and I will text you about it. But Mixon's been hurt, so he should be back this week. If he's back, start him. If he's not back, then put in Pierce instead. Okay.
I just got it says too many players on roster. How did that happen? I didn't add anyone.
Jane,
this is hard to do live.
Kristen broke ESPN. I don't know how she did it.
There you go. All right. So we've and now my percentage is up to 68%.
There we go.
Of likely to win. My projected points 122.
Yeah, that's it. You win. That's what we like to call free money. Let's go. We love it.
Do we know what kind of a purse we're talking about?
Well, this is the thing. As you might imagine, if you've been listening to this segment with any regularity and how serious I take my fantasy football compared to Dr. Mike, it's not very, because there's also not that much money on the line. This is a group of my girlfriends who I'm pretty sure most of our team names, I don't know if we can say on the radio because they're all like sexual innuendos that are hilarious. But again,
perhaps not appropriate.
Perhaps not appropriate for the radio. And we all buy in for like $20. So it's not that much money. And even the winner, it's kind of an agreement that you spend it on like a happy hour for us all to go out. So it's not, the competitiveness is probably on the bottom 10% in the range of leagues and friends and how much smack talk that happens. Ours is pretty minimal, but it's like a fun, we do it as a fun way to just pay attention to the games, have something to kind of look forward to. But it is certainly, I'm guessing there's a lot more smack talk in Michael's leagues, one of his 6 leagues that he's in.
It's bad. This thread is also very non-repeatable on air, this thread. But also the money is fine and good, and then you can like go do something with it and like take a picture and send it to your friends, like, thanks for this, loser, because you paid for this to happen, which is great. But I think just like having bragging rights for the year is nice, right? When the season's over, just have like 6 months of bragging rights, just to tell your friends, oh, that's really nice that you got a great promotion, you got engaged, but I beat your behind in fantasy football. It's great,
It's so emotionally healthy, Dr. Mike.
No, this is
it really is. Yeah. This show brings out the something in me. I don't know. If
the humanity is that you are not just a poignant, eloquent life coach, you're a human too who loves to beat your friends. So
Listen,
I'm going to set up.
Live your best life and wipe your friends' noses in it is the message of the show. Okay.
All right. So we have a couple minutes before we go to break. So I'll set up the next question that we got, and then we can answer it when we come back. So this is about relationships. Dr. Mike, I'm a 52-year-old woman and I'm going through a painful separation and probably a divorce. My husband just told me that he's going to rent a house near me in our somewhat small town. I feel like this is not a good decision as I'm trying to move on with my life without him. The idea of seeing him at the grocery store, gym, or God forbid, out on a date with someone new terrifies me. I don't want to come across as controlling, but by telling him what to do, but I really don't want him moving back here. P.S. He works remotely and doesn't have family here, so it's not like I'm keeping him from any of that. Should I say something, or should I just suck it up and let him live wherever he wants to live? Jane, how much time do we have? We only have a minute left. So think about it, because I think this is a really interesting question, because it's like you can't control your exes. Right. And we will come. Oh, go ahead.
One thing that I do, I'm honestly a very particular controlling person about, and I don't mind saying it, is that is what Jane wears in the holiday season. And she promised us light, and she promised us festivities, and I don't see any of it today, and I'm very controlling about that. And Jane, I want to see it next week.
All right. So if Dr. Mike will be here for our next segment. If you still have questions, submit them 844-967-2789. We will answer that relationship question when we come back from this break. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Search of you, many lies has brought you to recognize it's your life now in
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I'm Rick Smith, host of The Rick Smith Show.
All right, so we'll come back and I'll reread the question, and then we can answer it, and then we'll just do football for the rest of the segment, and we'll save the other question for next week.
Perfect. We didn't have any, the Packers are on a bye, so I was like, how are we going to work the Packers into this? So I did my best with the third one, because there's no Packers question. But I got the Packers one right this past week, so you can't make fun of me anymore.
I know. God, it was a good game too. It was fun to be able to rub it into Nick O'Connor's face once again.
I also have an excuse for why I didn't light up today, so I can tell you that too.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Way of life. But we'll get to all of that this evening.
The Paul Revere Show with Mark Thompson. Listen Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. on the Shaw 101 FM and WAUK 540 AM.
Courage. I learned it from my adoptive mom. Hold my hand.
You hold my hand. Learn about adopting a teen from foster care at adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Missed your favorite show live on air? It's easy to find what you enjoy wherever you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And we're always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app.
Here's your updated forecast on the Shaw. High temperatures reach up to 37 this afternoon under cloudy skies. Winds out of the east, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected again tonight. Lows dip down to about 30. A mixture of precipitation likely tomorrow. Daytime highs approaching 35. Overcast skies. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow through tomorrow night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
The Shaw 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM, Wisconsin's home for rational talk radio.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
Is your love life a fantasy? Having issues with your fantasy football roster? Helping with football and your love life? Here's your new best friend, Dr. Mike.
Because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
So live your life. You steady chasing that pimp.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry on the Civic Media Network. As always, at 11:30 on Thursdays, we are talking to Dr. Michael McCutcheon, and we are fixing your life and your lineup, and always my lineup, by answering your questions that you submit to have the doctor help out. So, Jane, you said that you have an excuse as to why you've not worn your light up.
Because Dr. Mike viciously just attacked me out of
Yes.
nowhere.
Yes, exactly.
As I expect from a good therapist. Dr. Mike, I'm holding back on the light up stuff because I'm debuting it this weekend at our holiday party.
Oh, so we'll send you a picture,
So-
Dr. Mike.
So
You
next
don't want that
Thursday.
battery to die. Yeah, you
Exactly.
need to reserve that battery.
You
that's fair.
gotta parse out the batteries, man. So
It's a long month. It's a long month. All right. So just to refresh the question that was submitted that we read before the break. I'm a 52-year-old woman and I'm going through a painful separation and probably a divorce. My husband just told me that he's going to rent a house near me in our somewhat small town. I feel like this is not a good decision as I'm trying to move on with my life without him. And the idea of seeing him at the grocery store or the gym or on a date terrifies me. I don't want to come off as controlling by telling him what to do, but I really don't want him moving back here. And then she goes on to say that he doesn't have a good reason to necessarily live there because he works remotely and doesn't have family there. And so she's wondering, should she say something or does she just have to suck it up and let him live where he wants to live?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I understand like not wanting to come across as controlling if you're in a separation. You don't want to, it's not a good look. But I think this is a very thoughtful question, the way that it's phrased. And I have a hunch that this person could communicate this to their husband in a way that's respectful. And I think you have to say something. I think it's for both parties, actually. He might be a little oblivious to the fact that this could sting him too, actually. You're just, in a grocery aisle and you turn a corner and all of a sudden, your soon to be ex-wife is there. And that's not fun for anybody, right? Just drop the eggs, they go everywhere, spill at the scene, it's embarrassing. You don't need that. It sounds like this guy's a little naive to what his emotions might actually be once he's back there. So I would suggest it and say, hey, maybe try somewhere else or somewhere else not so close and see what he says. It's not controlling to suggest it. And also, unfortunately, he might have to go through a couple of months of this, right? He might have to go through 3, 4, 5 months of this and realize that it's not working. I'm glad it's a rental he's looking at and not buying a house there. That's good. So let's think of this as, at worst case scenario, as a trial period. And this last comment that I'm going to say, I know it's a little bit, I don't know your situation as far as life, work, money, connections, any of that sort of stuff. But if he is there and it is hard for you, I know you got a lot of dust that needs settling here as far as a divorce is concerned. Once all that's done, if he does choose to move back and it's not working for you, it could be an opportunity for you to say, you know what, I'm going to take this as a sign that maybe I need to start fresh. He wants to be here. I don't like it, but maybe I'm going to go start fresh with a new city and a new life as well. I think that's probably your third and last case scenario, but I'd give the other ones a shot as well. And just saying how you feel and how you predict he's going to feel is not controlling. It's actually a loving statement to communicate that to him.
All right. Good answer, per usual. All right. Well, we got someone who must be a regular listener to this segment that knows that you're a Browns fan. But someone texted in a question for the doctor that says, what's it like cheering for Deshaun Watson as a Browns fan? Who is a bigger villain, a quarterback villain, Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers?
That's funny. Bigger villain is definitely Deshaun. I'll give you that. And I think Aaron Rodgers is kind of like a lovable villain. He like puts his bare foot up on the desk and he goes on all these diatribes about his conspiracy theories and he's taking ayahuasca out in the woods and probably making himself a mask out of monkey fur or something. He's wild. But he's kind of lovable. The other one is not so much. But you know what?
That's what I think. It's like it feels like apples and oranges in that question of like you're just kind of someone who's a little odd versus someone who's actually a criminal.
Yeah, I kind of like roll my eyes and chuckle at Aaron when he does something silly. It doesn't bother me. It's kind of trying to separate the player from the team. I root for a lot of guys in the team because people like they've devoted their whole entire lives to be here. They want to be in the NFL and they train on the off season. They train during the week and they're all injured. It's like week 14. Everyone's injured and they play through all this and their family comes out on the road and they're playing out in the snow just to be booed every single down because of somebody that the team brought in. I can't bring myself to hate the other, 50 some guys on the team or not root for the team. So I do root for the team and I hope that they do well because they deserve it. They've been through a lot as a team in lots of ways. So I try to separate the guy from the team, which is not easy since he's the one touching the ball every single play. Not the easiest thing to do. But yeah, I try to just like walk with one eye open, really.
All right. That's a good PC answer. All right, but so let's now make some money on FanDuel. So tonight's Thursday night football matchup on Amazon Prime features the Vegas Raiders versus the LA Rams. The Raiders are favored to win on the road in LA by 6.5 points. Will the Raiders cover the spread against the defending champs, or should we take the Rams?
First of all, Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, which I know you are, we talk about Amazon Prime or something having to do with Amazon deliveries almost every week on this show, and I think you should probably start sponsoring the show. So just throwing that out there. All your ratings have been so good, probably because of us. So thank you in advance for that future sponsorship. And so I think you gotta smash the Raiders on this one. The Raiders haven't covered in an away game where they're the favorites in like 7 or 8 games, which means either A, I'm making a really bad call here because they're not going to cover this one. They're not going to win by more than 6.5, or B, they're due. And that sentence has probably been spoken by so many degenerate loser gamblers like me throughout the years. But I do think the Raiders are due to cover. The Rams stink. They're using backup quarterback. They're all banged up. Aaron Donald is out. The Raiders used to play in LA. They're going to have a lot of fans there. I think you take the Raiders in this one.
All right. Well, we only have a minute left, so I'm not going to, we'll have to save some of these for next time, but the Packers have a bye, so you don't have to predict anything this week because of that. But you were finally right. We did beat the Bears. So
did, and I predict
it's like 1 out of 5.
The Packers will not lose this week. That's my prediction. Yeah.
That is a great, solid prediction. All right, Dr. Michael McCutcheon, thank you as always for joining us. He will be back next Thursday at 11:30. And thank you again.
It's good to see you both. I'll talk to you soon. It's always a pleasure.
All right. We'll come back with more headlines after the break. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Smash certificators amplify the thrill of being a witness and better your predictive aptitude for your squad. Future physical fitness. Sports go sports. Athletics are number 1. Participants are heroes. Go team, yeah. Sports go sports. Athletics are number 1. Participants.
You are listening to your local Civic Media radio station on air. Thank you. Did you know we are always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app too? And if you miss a show or game, find it wherever you get your podcasts or on our website, civicmedia.us.
This local musical interlude is brought to you by Max Inc. Radio, VO5.
Let's do it on the dance floor. Let's do it how we can. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Listen to Max Inc. Radio every Saturday and Sunday, 6 p.m. to midnight. Download the podcast at maxincradio.com. We are local music.
Women get a lot of advice about self-care these days, but one of the most important self-care steps we can take is making sure we're financially secure later in life. For small steps you can take to save for retirement, visit WeSaySaveIt.org. A message.
You are listening to WAUK 540 AM Jackson, W266 DR Waukesha, always streaming on the Civic Media app.
AP News, I'm Ed Donahue. The House passed a bill to protect same-sex marriage.
An historic step forward in Democrats' fight to defend the dignity and equality of every American.
After passage in Speaker Nancy Pelosi's House, President Biden is expected to promptly sign the measure, which requires all states to recognize same-sex marriages. Among those voting no, Missouri Republican Vicky Hartzler.
I'll tell you my priority. Protect religious liberty.
protect people of faith, and protect Americans who believe in the true meaning of marriage.
Democrats are concerned after the Supreme Court overturned the right to an abortion, fearing banning same-sex marriage may be next. With WNBA star Brittany Griner freed from a Russian prison, Griner's wife Sherelle says,
"Today my family is whole, but as you all are aware, there's so many other families who are not whole."
Griner was released in exchange for the U.S. release of a Russian arms dealer. American Paul Wayland is still being held in Russia on espionage charges.
BG and I will remain committed to the work of getting every American home, including Paul, whose family is in our hearts today as we celebrate BG being home.
A new AP NORC poll shows 43% approve of the way President Biden is handling his job, while 55% disapprove. This is AP polling reporter Hannah Fingerhut.
Only about a quarter of Americans say the nation is headed in the right direction or that the economy is in good shape. Both ratings have similarly been negative throughout this year as inflation tightened its grip, but remain lower than they were during Biden's first year in office.
A House committee report says the NFL's Washington Commanders created a toxic work culture for more than 2 decades, ignoring and downplaying sexual misconduct by men at the top levels of the organization. The NFL was also criticized for its handling of the investigation of the Commanders and owner Daniel Snyder. This is AP News.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's Medi-Share. Maybe you've heard switching to Medi-Share to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month. And that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch too. The customer satisfaction rate for Medi-Share is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Medi-Share works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
Women hear a lot about self-care these days. Advice on ways to relax, exercise, eat healthy, and more. Those are all great. But one of the most important self-care steps we can take is making sure we're financially secure later in life. That means saving money for retirement. It's never too late to start. And it's the kind of self-care that brings peace of mind that lasts. For small steps you can take to save for retirement, visit WeSaySaveIt.org. That's WeSaySaveIt.org. A message from AARP and the Ad Council.
Hey, this is Matt from Design Garden. Remember when the internet was new? Back then you had to leave your house to start a business. Companies used to pay programmers bags of cash to get online. Now, small businesses can get online with a Facebook business page, or Squarespace, or Google My Business, or WordPress. But which tools should you use? Can you afford to go down the wrong path? Design Garden uses modern tools to build your website the right way. Find us online at design.garden. Again, that's design.garden.
So all you folks out there, if you haven't registered to vote, register to vote, get ready to vote. There are so many things on the ballot this November at our freedom, our liberty, and our way of life. But we'll get to all of that this evening.
The Paul Revere Show with Mark Thompson. Listen Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. on the Shaw 101 FM and WAUK 540 AM.
My mother was very familiar with her neighborhood, but one day she stopped at the stop sign and she wasn't even really sure where she was at.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
For Civic Media, I'm Terry Bell with this news. American Red Cross employees are preparing to go on strike during the Upper Midwest's largest blood drive on the 23rd if there's not a new contract agreement by a week from today. Union employees have been trying to reach a new deal for almost a year and a half. The Red Cross has canceled or rescheduled 21 meetings in that time and is telling negotiators there isn't money for pay raises. The idea of passenger train service in Madison is back on track. City leaders are getting public input on 5 proposed train stops in Wisconsin's capital. It's not a foregone conclusion. Washington still hasn't released the money, and the city and state would have to agree on specifics. In sports, the Bucks beat Sacramento last night. College volleyball's Sweet 16 played today. Wisconsin hosts Penn State, and Marquette takes on top-seeded Texas. You're listening to The Shaw, 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM.
As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry is an independent product and has a joint sales agreement with Civic Media. Enjoy.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. Thank you for joining us today during your lunch hour. A reminder that if you like our show, please tell your friends, because we are a growing show on growing networks and stations across the state. And we could definitely use your help, because we're doing stuff differently as far as when it comes to talk radio, the topics we pick, the guests we get, and we need help to spread the word. And so, as always, we want to hear from you. 844-967-2789. And we're going to do some more headlines and just things that caught my eye that I feel like we should discuss. But first, I want to do a little bit of a shout out, because I might have had Skittles for dinner last night. Not really. I also had real food. Good. But then I had cookies for breakfast, thanks to Periwinkle's Bakery on 143 West Broadway, right here in Waukesha. They dropped off cookies for us yesterday.
I know.
Connie, shout out to Connie. She wrote us a little Christmas, little note on a package of Christmas cookies. It says, "Thanks for all you do." So thank you for those cookies. And they're delicious.
They are delicious, and they're beautiful.
They are beautiful. There is something, as much as I love a good chocolate chip cookie, the festive, decorated Christmas cookies are much more beautiful.
Something special.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about this yesterday, but we didn't have time, because while we talked about this morning, what job would you do for free? But same kind of question, different side of the coin. How much would it take for you to move to a different part of the state?
Ooh.
Do you have a number?
For a salary?
No, to help you buy a home.
How much would it take?
Well, you already have a home, and I already have a home, so
Right.
we're maybe not the target audience. But
So we're talking about possibly a younger.
maybe not. Just it's in the realm of trying to buy a house.
Okay.
As if you pay attention to the news, not only just in Wisconsin, across the country, affordable housing is a issue as more and more private equity and private companies are buying homes. There's lots of wealthy people who are buying second and third homes so that then they can then Airbnb them. And so the supply of affordable starter homes is limited and
expensive.
And, for a lot of places, the rent is as much as a mortgage payment would be. But the problem becomes that that first down payment and not having that much money to be able to put on the down payment. Well, Green Bay, in their efforts to attract and recruit more people to live in Green Bay, is starting a new initiative. So Great Being Home will offer up to $10,000 in a down payment assistance to anyone who buys a Green Bay home and works for the city, for a city-based business with fewer than less than 25 employees, or for a Green Bay-based nonprofit. So this launched this Tuesday, and there's obviously some requirements, but the city of Green Bay had originally seeded the program with $250,000 from American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and it was enough to give 50 different home buyers $5,000 each. And then NeighborWorks Green Bay is going to administer the program and draw on other down payment assistance programs to match the city's incentive to increase the benefit each home buyer can receive to up to $10,000, which that's a significant portion of a down payment.
I don't think it's enough.
Really?
No.
Well, I don't know. So in Green Bay, I don't know what the market looks like right now.
What's the average for a starter home?
And it may not be the whole thing, but it's certain. I mean, $10,000 for a down payment, especially if you're a younger couple, because isn't there also assistance programs for first-time home buyers as far as how much of the down payment you have to, like the percentage of it is less as an additional incentive program?
That could be. It's been a long time since I was a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, fair.
But I mean, you used to be required to put down 20%.
See, I don't think we put down 20% this year. No, I think it was
much less
than that. And I think this would actually make a big difference for people. And so the incentive is trying to address two big challenges that I think Green Bay is facing, but I think a lot of Wisconsin and I think a lot of places are feeling the same thing, maybe besides Madison. As we know, Dane County was was the only county in Wisconsin that grew over the last 10 years when it comes to population. But the challenge being more families can find home ownership because it's hard to do right now. But also employers are struggling to attract and retain workers. And so part of this all goes into having, on the employer side, is having affordable housing within driving distance to where your business is. So you can have this statewide labor shortage in so many different industries is partially because of either the transportation infrastructure of people being able to get to work without necessarily needing a car, but also being able to live close to where they work and being able to afford a home close to where they work. And so I think this is a good thing. It would be interesting to see, one, if it works, but two, if it gets replicated. Because obviously this is something that I don't know how long it can last for because it was part of the ARPA money, but there's also just companies that are matching the benefits because they can see the benefit that it's going to provide to them.
It's tough. And more and more employers are going to have to start stepping up and figuring out what they can offer in order to get the bodies that they need.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that rents are so high, it shouldn't be 60% of your salary just to put a roof over your head.
I know. Well, and especially in the feeling of, why am I paying this much in rent that just goes down the drain when it could, when a mortgage would be the same, and the big hurdle is just that down payment.
Right.
Because that's the same thing that happens in Milwaukee. I'm sure it happens in Waukesha. I'm sure it's happening all over the place as far as just the incongruent balance between what wages are, what salaries are, and how expensive it has gotten to both for rent and housing costs.
Well, and isn't it pretty much the norm that the average American doesn't have an extra $5,000 on hand, even for emergencies?
Let alone a down payment.
Yeah, let alone 5 to 10, 15 grand for a down payment on a house.
Yeah. Well, some other kind of similar but different good news as far as workforce, training, and education is that enrollment at Wisconsin technical colleges has grown by 10%.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so across the country, across the state with the pandemic, colleges and universities definitely saw a decline. And I think the UW system, besides Madison, I've seen numbers for that as there's certainly more and more of a decline of people going to the four-year colleges of the UW system. And Jay Rothman, there's different programs trying to increase, whether it's scholarship money or the last mile for students who come from families that make less than $65,000 a year. So there's all these different ways that people are trying to increase enrollment for different schools. But it's good to know that enrollment across the Wisconsin Technical College system has grown more than 10% in this last academic year. And so there's 16 different technical colleges, and across all of them, there was gains. And I can't stress enough how I feel like the technical college, community college option could be a huge key to the overall cost of going to school. And also I feel like the opportunity of, as we see additional stories coming out of the COVID generation of the kids who were in high school and spent so much of their high school experience was disrupted by at-home learning and going back to school and all of the stuff, and like the learning loss that has happened there, and kids showing up to college maybe not necessarily prepared to be in college.
Right.
Because I'll say, like, I started at community college, and this was in California, so I know less about what the technical community college curriculum looks like in Wisconsin. I'd assume it's good. But at least my experience I didn't go to college right away because I was acting. And as I was acting, I was like, oh, is this it? Is this really what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, is audition? And started taking classes kind of just out of interest and fun at Santa Monica College, and feeling like I liked school. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was like, I'm actually really good at this. And the opportunity to learn how to go to college in a smaller environment, with the professor to student ratio being much smaller than it would be at a public university, and really learning and like taking all my general ed requirements at there, and then getting to transfer to, not to toot my own horn, but one of the best public universities in the country, if not the world, and getting to go to the opportunity to go to UC Berkeley. But like, I would never have gotten in there as a freshman. And I don't think I would have thrived had I not been able to get that foundation by going to community college. And so I'm very encouraged that it sounds like the Wisconsin technical colleges are, one, seeing more of enrollment, and also changing their curriculum to different student needs in order to try to attract more people. And so like, they're building more flexibility into class schedules so that they can accommodate people who have kids and like childcare, and they're providing more online options. And so like, the flexibility and not being so rigid in the attempt to give more people an option to continue their education, I think is a really good thing. And it'd be interesting to see if the UW system can learn some of this as well, as far as they are trying to recruit and increase enrollment across all the different campuses.
I so wish I had done that. I wish I had gone to a community college first, because I think I would have finished college had I done that.
And I feel like there is, shame feels like a really strong word, but in the pressure to go to college, go to a good college, go to the best college, and this idea that there's some kind of embarrassment around not going to four-year university as an 18-year-old. Like, just the more we can debunk that, I think the better, because education is education, even if you're just taking one class at a time.
And especially for people, I was from a very small town, it had 8,000 people. I went to the University of Minnesota. That was the campus. Campus was bigger than my hometown. I was afraid of the bus drivers. So it would have probably helped me to start a little smaller.
All right. Well, when we come back, we'll have a couple more headlines. And then at 12:30, we are talking to Dr. Scott Saunders about addiction medication in hospitals. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Hey, this is Jim Santel. I am the host of Morning Cannolis. Every single Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., we talk about the major stories in law, in government, and the aspiration for justice in America. Delighted to have you join, call in, and be a part of our discussion right here on the networks of Civic Media.
Dueling Tangents with Luke and Brian.
I'm really trying hard not to go insane from the mind screw that is this situation with the I was going to say the GAB, but now it's the WEC, which was audited by the LAB, and then it's now screwed up by the GOP, and we're all SOL. Good for us. Congratulations.
Look at all those acronyms. Yeah.
We're the winners.
Tune in for Dueling Tangents every weekday at 2.
What is dedication?
I think a parent's job is to protect our children, but also prepare them for the world so they become good, kind human beings.
That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov.
It's easy to listen to your favorite local radio station anytime. Download the Civic Media app from the Apple or Google Play Store, then listen live or whenever you want from anywhere for free.
Here's your updated forecast on the Shaw. High temperatures reach up to 37 this afternoon under cloudy skies. Winds out of the east 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected again tonight. Lows dip down to about 30. A mixture of precipitation likely tomorrow. Daytime highs approaching 35. Overcast skies. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow through tomorrow night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
A progressive voice for rural Wisconsin. WAUK 540 AM. Always streaming at WAUKradio.com.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. It is 12:21. Thank you for joining us on your lunch hour. We got a couple more headlines that we wanted to highlight before we move on to welcoming Dr. Scott Saunders at the bottom of the hour. But unless something has changed, there are now 4 Republicans running for the 8th Senate District in Wisconsin. As of yesterday, Thiensville Village President Van Mobley tells Wisp Politics that he is getting in the race. And so Mobley is in his 4th term as village president, but he is the 4th Republican to announce plans to run for the seat in the special election, which I think has still not been scheduled. And if it's going to align with the other upcoming planned nonpartisan races that we have coming up, including the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But this is Alberta Darling's seat. And so far it is Janelle Brandtjen, who is a assembly rep in that district of Menominee Falls, Dan Knodel of Germantown, Concordia student Robert Albrechtson.
Really?
Which I hadn't until I read this about Van Mobley. He lives in Brown Deer and he's running. So it's a young Republican, I imagine. But as of still, doesn't sound like there's a Democrat running. Have you heard of anything, rumblings after Deb Andraka said that she will not be running for this seat? Have you heard anything as far as someone who is running?
For some reason, I want to say that Devils talked about this yesterday.
Oh, really?
And I am drawing a complete blank. I don't know that anyone from
has
the Democratic
filed?
Party has officially filed.
But there's rumors?
There are some rumors.
Because four I mean, it'll be interesting. It's interesting that it's 4 in such a short period of time. But yeah, it goes back to the ongoing conversation about, recruitment. This is as we talked about at the beginning of the hour. This is part of Ben Wickler's job.
Yeah.
I'm sure now that the job is over for the November election, this is probably on his mind of trying to see who we could get to run for that seat. Because while it does lean more Republican, it sounds like it is potentially, it's a seat that could be flipped for Democrats
with the right candidate.
With the right candidate. And the reason why that is important is because as of right now, with no person, because Alberta Darling is now retired. So starting this legislative session, while they being the Republicans, had a supermajority in the Senate, without that seat, they do not. And so if they can flip that seat, it will keep the GOP in Wisconsin from having a supermajority in the state Senate.
And remind folks what it would mean if the GOP has a supermajority in the Senate.
So from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically they can impeach different appointments. And as far as, there's already so many appointed seats that have not been approved. But that's what I understand is why it's so important as far as while they would also need a supermajority in the assembly to override Governor Evers' veto of things. It's while just having a supermajority in the Senate, it comes down to appointments and being able to impeach appointed positions if they don't do their job or break the rules, or if they find a different arbitrary reason to do that.
They haven't appointed anybody yet.
I know.
We still have bad cartons of cottage cheese sitting on all these boards who should have been gone 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yes. Well, then Wisconsin made national news And sometimes it's really, I feel like the ratio of Wisconsin making national news for a good reason versus a bad reason. I don't know what that ratio is. And not necessarily this is a bad reason. This could probably happen anywhere, but it did happen at the Dane County Madison Airport. If you're going to travel with your small pets,
I saw this.
You're going to travel with your small pets this holiday season, please do not put them in your carry-on backpack.
And send it through the X-ray machine.
The TSA in Madison, which if you've ever flown out of the Madison Airport, it's grown and there are more and more direct flights you can get in and out of Madison now, but it is still a very tiny little airport that is very easy to get through. And I've been through it plenty of times, and I'm just trying to imagine the TSA found a dog inside a backpack that was accidentally sent through the X-ray machine this past week. And so just a reminder that if you're going to bring your small dog onto the plane, they need to be in a specific carrier that's meant for pets, not in your backpack.
And you don't send them through the X-ray machine.
I'm just surprised. I guess it was a little wiener dog Chihuahua mix, so I'm sure it was adorable. But they printed this picture this was in USA Today. I saw it in multiple places. In all the newsletter roundups I got, the story made a lot of them. And they printed this little picture of this poor little dog inside this backpack. And was he trying to hide him?
Whoever did this wasn't charged with anything, from what I understand.
No, I
thought it was just a mistake.
But did she think that she wasn't, that
they weren't going to see
it's an X-ray machine. Do you think it was a first-time flyer? I'm so confused over the decision-making process of how she got here, or he. I actually don't know if the person whose dog it was is a male or a female. But please don't do that.
Yeah. No, don't do that. And if it is your first time flying, maybe look up some rules. Don't bring a loaded gun.
That too. Do not do
not do that. It happens shockingly frequently, even now. Derek Van Orden.
Yeah. But just please, animals should never be put through an X-ray tunnel.
No.
Please don't do that.
No.
So, all right. Well, we're going to take another break. But when we come back, we're going to have a conversation around addiction specialists and the need for them in more hospitals with Dr. Scott Saunders, who, fun fact, when he did his residency, it was at UW-Madison, and he was the chief resident. So still a Wisconsin connection. It always comes back to Wisconsin. All right. Stay with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Just 'cause you heard it.
The Shaw 101 FM, Franklin's choice for news talk radio. Streaming 24/7 at WAUKradio.com.
¿Te tiene agobiado tu trabajo? ¿Sueñas con una carrera profesional donde puedas ganar más dinero y te sientas apreciado? Si tu respuesta es afirmativa, entonces Sigma Castings, una división de Sigma Engineered Solutions en Marquez y Jackson, es tu respuesta. Son más que una empresa, son una familia de expertos dedicados que abarcan continentes. Te harán sentir apreciado de muchas maneras. Por ejemplo, el nivel básico de pago es de $18 por hora con revisiones periódicas de rendimiento. Después de los primeros 90 días de empleo, tendrás derecho a 80 horas de vacaciones, más 11 feriados pagados. Aún más, ganarías un bono de $2,000 por permanecer en tu puesto. Te ofrecen un paquete de beneficios robusto, con primas bajas y excelente cobertura, y su plan de retiro 401k te va a impresionar. Se está contratando ahora para el primer turno, lunes a viernes de 5 de la mañana a 2 de la tarde. Empieza tu nueva carrera ya con Sigma Castings en Marquez y Jackson. Encuéntralos en Indeed o llama a 920-260-8560 y levántate en la mañana feliz de ir a...
I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. WNBA star Brittany Griner is free. She was in prison in Russia on drug charges and was released in exchange for the U.S. release of a Russian arms dealer. The U.S. has also been trying to work out the release of American Paul Whelan, accused of espionage. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was asked why Griner was released and not Whelan.
This was not a choice of which American to bring home. The choice was one or none.
South Carolina women's basketball coach Dawn Staley is a friend of Griner. She told the AP,
everyone that doubted this moment and everybody that will criticize Brittany coming home for who we had to trade her for, this is an American citizen. And anytime we can bring any American citizen home, then we need to do that.
Paul Whelan's family says the Biden administration made the right decision by agreeing to the swap, but they're devastated Whelan remains behind. I'm Ed Donahue.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's Medi-Share. Maybe you've heard switching to Medi-Share to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after...
Hello.
Hi. Can you
How
hear
doing?
me?
Yeah.
Good.
Good. You look so cute.
Thank you.
All right. So when we come back in about a minute and a half, we got a couple texts based on what we were just talking about. So I'm going to throw to Jane to acknowledge those, and then I'll introduce you and the topic. And then this first segment's longer, so we'll have till 12:48. And I sent you the questions. It'll be free flowing, and then we'll have a 2-minute commercial break, and then we'll come back and have another 8 minutes, and then you are free to enjoy your day off. All right, this
Jane,
is
it's good to see you. I've watched you with Michael many times.
For Civic Media, I'm Jane Matnair with your headlines. Wisconsin company Packers Sanitation Services Incorporated, which was found to be employing minors to clean slaughterhouses in 3 states, has been ordered by a federal judge to comply with child labor laws. Initially, investigators found at least 31 underage workers as young as 13. Further investigation found at least 50 minors scrubbing and sanitizing dangerous equipment on overnight shifts. At least 5 meatpacking plants in Nebraska, Minnesota, and Arkansas have been identified as employing minors. PSSI agreeing to fire underage workers and sanction any managers who were involved in hiring them. The meat processing companies who own the plants where the workers were identified say they're monitoring the investigation and will consider taking action against PSSI if necessary. You're listening to The Shaw, 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM.
Hello, Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. No matter where you're listening across the Civic Media Network or on the Civic Media app, thank you for tuning in on your lunch hour. If you've missed any part of today's show, you can always listen to the whole thing or individual interviews as a podcast, either at asgoeswisconsin.com/listen or wherever you find podcasts. And so during the break, we got a couple texts from what we were talking about before, right, Jane?
We did. We weren't sure if the special election had been set for the 8th district, and texter from the 608 said, yes, Governor Evers has announced the election for the same time as the Supreme Court race. And then 507 checking in when we were talking about the down payment on the house and what the minimum down payment is right now. 507 says, my son-in-law is a mortgage broker. Minimum down payment now 3.5%. So $10,000, a big help.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a down payment. So thanks, you guys, very much.
We love getting texts and calls from you because we don't know everything. Contrary to popular belief, I do not know everything. So keep them coming, 844-967-2789. But our topic for this half hour, I think, affects a lot of people. It affects people all over the country right now, whether it's you personally or a loved one, because I saw this article in NPR that was the headline was hospitals have specialists on call for lots of diseases, but not addiction. Why not? And I saw that and I immediately thought of my dear friend, Dr. Scott Saunders, who's a board certified internist practicing hospital medicine at University Colorado Hospital in Denver, because not only is he an MD who, by the way, was the chief resident when he did his residency at UW-Madison. But he also, last time we were all together, we told me that he's now certified also in addiction medicine and being a specialty in that. And it wasn't until reading this article that I realized what a niche he's filling in right now. And so here to talk to us about the need for this specialist in hospitals, but that we're not necessarily having, is Dr. Scott Saunders. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I guess, the crux of this story is that what we all know is that there is a crisis with opioid and fentanyl addiction and overdoses, and the opportunity for hospitals to be kind of the crucial impasse to intervene and treat people suffering from addiction. It could make a huge difference, but there's just, most hospitals don't have specialists available who know how to treat addiction. And so was that your motivation for even wanting to go get more education and get specialized in this, because you saw that there was like kind of a dearth there?
So yeah, it wasn't my realization myself, but we have a faculty member at the University of Colorado named Dr. Susan Calcaterra, who is board certified herself. I think she was boarded in 2018, around then. And she ended up getting a grant to train 10 of us hospitalists, not in an official fellowship, but to basically catch us up with enough knowledge of the medicine to staff a consult service. So she saw the need at our hospital for that, and then trained a bunch of us up and staffed this consult service with the goal of getting us all board certified in the next several years. So that's how I got into it.
So to back up a little bit, because I'll totally admit, even though we're good friends, what is a hospitalist? And so like when you went through med school in your residency to be a hospitalist, what does that cover as far as being an MD in a hospital?
Yeah, so I'm a general practitioner in the terms of I practice general internal medicine. And so through internal medicine, you can either become a general practitioner and just stop there after residency and become like a primary care doctor, or practice general medicine in the hospital, or you can go on and do fellowships and subspecialize to a lot of things that people have heard of, like cardiology, pulmonology, lung doctors, things like that. So as a hospitalist, I practice general medicine in the hospital, and I usually tell people my age, like if your parents are admitted to the hospital with a common medical diagnosis, I'll probably be the one taking care of them. And if there's multiple specialists that are needed, I'll be kind of the quarterback of the team and kind of guide their care.
So then, as you've now gone through training to be specialized in addiction treatment, what did that look like as compared to all of your training and all of your med school and your residency? And was that just information that was totally void in everything you learned before, as far as what you needed to learn to be able to do these bedside consults?
Yeah, it was. I was chatting with some of my residency colleagues earlier this week about what we experienced in residency with addiction medicine. And it's vastly different than how I practice now and how I teach my students and resident doctors. So there's been a huge shift, I think, in how residency programs approach addiction medicine. It's a required part of training for internal medicine physicians, where it didn't used to be. So that has hugely changed. And for most subspecialties, you have to complete a fellowship. And that's where things are trending with addiction medicine. So in 2025, you'll have to do a true blue fellowship where you go somewhere, train there for a year. That's all you're doing. But in kind of the development of any subspecialties throughout the history of medicine in America, at least, when people subspecialize enough on their own, let's say they did enough eye medicine, eventually a board forms and people decide, well, people probably should have actual training in eye medicine. And so at that point, they'll grandfather a lot of people in. If you've been doing ophthalmology for 30 years, just because that's how you niched yourself, they'll grandfather you in, and you may have to take boards and things like that, but you don't have to do that, that actual fellowship training. So I'm being grandfathered in, and I took my boards in October. So I'm board eligible, hopefully board certified very soon when I pass it. But that's kind of, this is such a new area and a new need in America that the system is catching up to the practice that's happening.
Because, I think And it sounds like from reading this article and talking to you that both on the side of doctors and employees of hospitals, but also patients themselves and even patients of loved ones, the mental switch of treating addiction as a disease versus a moral failing. And that it is something that requires more than just self-control and discipline to get over this. And so is that kind of the big switch that you've seen as far as getting this training and how doctors are being hopefully trying to switch how they approach someone who is also struggling with addiction?
100%. And the flow of patient care is totally different when I'm on the addiction medicine service, because I get to sit down and spend an hour with the patient. And I basically, my opening question to them is, hey, I'm with this consult service. I'm here to help people that may be struggling with X, Y, or Z substance that I know they struggle with. And I say, I hear that that's really impacted your life. Do you mind telling me how it's impacted your life? And, when I have my internal medicine hat on, I'm typically going in saying like, hey, how are you feeling today? Okay, that's great. Here's going to be our plan for the day. Here's the specialist I'm talking to. I'll circle back with you later when I have more info. So I get to sit down and really hear people's life stories. And some of these patients, it's like, well, yeah, of course you became addicted to whatever, you were so set up to fail by all these things in your life that you couldn't control. And you also get to hear kind of how much they have struggled with whatever they're using. I would say upper 90% of the people that I see in the hospital that have struggled with substance use don't want to be using that substance. They're no longer enjoying it. They're not getting euphoric from anything they're using. It's really just hurting their life. And especially with opioids, people are mainly using to stay out of withdrawal, so to feel normal. And so hearing that and actually kind of getting to build my own empathy for people that struggle with this was huge for me. And so that's one thing that I really, when I have residents and students that come through, I spend a lot of time talking with them about that, because I think, if I see that same person with my internal medicine hat on, I may have 10 or 15 minutes with them while I'm rounding. And as you could imagine, if somebody's feeling really terrible because they're withdrawing, because their life is, completely falling apart around them, it's really hard to be a likable person in that situation, right? You feel terrible. And so I think healthcare providers can get the wrong sense of who a person is. And it makes it easy to just write them off and say, well, that's just not a nice person. And, they don't deserve the same kind of treatment somebody else might. And so building that empathy for our own providers, I think has been a huge part of my own growth and also the growth for my learners.
We're talking to Dr. Scott Saunders, who is an internist at University of Colorado Hospital, but also is recently an addiction treatment specialist. And so we're talking about the need for more of you, basically, in hospitals across the country, as a country we have such a crisis in opioid overdose. But one of the things I learned in this article, the NPR article that I found, was that disclosing an addiction can sometimes make it hard for that person to then find housing or a job or even sometimes medical care in other hospitals. It sounds like not yours. But so how often are you dealing with potential, like a patient comes in for something else and you kind of have to get it out of them that they're also struggling with addiction because they don't even want to admit that to a doctor?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the biggest ideas in addiction medicine is that a person to feel ready to change and want to change in some capacity. Typically for opioids, people, if they don't want to talk to me, that's totally fine. I'll respect that. But I will say to them, one thing I don't want to happen is I don't want you to go through withdrawal and be miserable while you're here. So if you're concerned about that, let me know. I'll make sure we manage that appropriately and keep you comfortable. And if they say I'm not, then I say, okay, sounds good. Our team's here if you need us. But yeah, people will get frustrated, I think, if a urine drug screen shows positive for a drug and the patient doesn't want to talk about it or doesn't, admit it if they ask them. And it's really like, well, if they want help and they want to talk to us about it, they will. And that's totally fine. So kind of giving them the agency to control that part of their care, I think, is an important part of how we approach them.
But Scott, in order to effectively treat someone, you really need all of that information. If someone comes in with a broken arm and they're addicted to opioid, you need to know all of that in order to effectively take care of them.
That's true. And I'll say the biggest thing would be like if somebody starts withdrawing from a substance. But generally people are really open. I mean, unless they're just fooling me and I'm not, people are just lying to me and I don't know. But generally, especially if somebody uses opioids, and if you approach them and say, hey, I'm here to help you in any way that I can, that you think is appropriate, people are really responsive to that. And I think it's such a way that a lot of people have not been treated in a hospital before. Like just coming to them like a person and saying, I'm just trying to make you comfortable. So generally people are really frank, which was kind of surprising to me too when I started this, but they'll tell you what's going on, and they truly don't want to withdraw. That's like a pretty horrendous experience for people. And so if that's on the table that we can help keep them out of that, they're generally quite honest.
It's so interesting because I think, and we're going to keep you through the commercial break, because I think it's also interesting because of thinking about addiction as, like we said, a disease, and something that I assume that some people are more predetermined to fall prey to because of background biology. And so I want to talk about more about that as far as like how much it changes depending on what the addiction is to, and also how that changes treatment plans. And then any ideas you have as far as like how hospitals can invest more in people like you, because it seems like this is something that there's a unique opportunity to help people while they are in the hospital versus just waiting for them to try to find help. And so we are going to keep Dr. Scott Saunders through the commercial break. If you have any questions for him, he'll be here for another 8 minutes in the next segment. So 844-967-2789. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Stay with us.
This local musical interlude is brought to you by Max Inc. Radio.
Good job, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. So when we come back, unless there's anything else you think specifically we should cover, which I'm happy to change the plan. But one of the questions that I didn't get to yet is like, when it comes to addiction, how much is, from what you've learned, how much is predetermined because of someone's unique biology and family history versus the environment they find themselves in? And then maybe a little on like, how do treatment plans change depending on what someone is addicted to? And is there anything else that you feel like should be important to get out there?
No, I think those are good.
Okay.
Those are good.
Because I don't want you to be like, as one singular doctor, being like, this is how we should change the hospital system in the country. Like, I know that's not like your role. And so I was like, all right, more of like the specifics of what you've learned and like how you're treating it, even though it is a problem, it sounds like, for having more people who can do this work.
Yes, we need more doctors. It's interesting. We're trying to catch up. So I think that's like from this program alone, there's going to be like 11 new board certified doctors in the world.
Totally.
So
we have cool. that. We reach that many people. We're going to inspire people to go do it.
Yeah.
All right, great. And then Jane, do you have more questions? I have.
Your mom called. She has a question.
Debbie Bry.
She's not going to, I'm going to ask it for her.
Oh, she didn't want to go on the radio? All right, we'll start with that one then.
She's what do you want for Christmas?
High temperatures reach up to 37 this afternoon under cloudy skies. Winds out of the east, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected again tonight. Lows around 30. Cloudy skies expected tomorrow. A mixture of precipitation likely. Daytime highs approaching 33. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow through tomorrow night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Derek Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
Bringing some sanity to the airwaves. The Shaw 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. We are talking to Dr. Scott Saunders, who is a board-certified internist practicing hospital medicine and addiction medicine at University of Colorado Hospital, about the need for more doctors in hospitals or specialists in general to be treating addiction when patients come in that need that kind of help. And it's something that I guess as a country, we have a lack of currently. And I think we had a question that's a caller that came in over the break.
We did. We had a caller from the Rapids wondering, Scott, because you're in Colorado, do you know, are there any hospital facilities in Wisconsin that offer what your facility is offering in Colorado?
Yeah, so I was chatting with some of my colleagues at the University of Wisconsin because I thought if I'm going to be on a Wisconsin radio show, I should probably know what's happening. So in Madison, I know there's a similar group of providers like addiction medicine specialists, social work, case managers, things like that will help. I'm not sure about in the other cities around the state, but at least at the university they have that. And then I talked to, one of the biggest issues with this is linkage to care. So it's great if you can start somebody on a medicine like Suboxone or Methadone in the hospital, but it doesn't really do much for somebody if you can't get them follow up in a nearby clinic where they can continue that treatment as an outpatient. So talking to my primary care friends, that's been I think a barrier for how do you set that clinic up for people? Who staffs it? Is it primary care doctors? Is it addiction medicine providers? So trying to build that infrastructure as we go, I think has been a challenge for probably everybody around the country.
Well, and I would imagine, I have no numbers to back this up, but I mean, in that article, they said 1 in 9 hospitalized patients has a history of an addiction to drugs or alcohol, which is a wildly huge number. But I think there's so much, we hear so much about opioids and fentanyl, largely, I think, because that's where there's a lot of overdoses. And like you said, the withdrawal from that is horrendous. But how much does the treatment plan change with someone who is an alcoholic or addicted to cocaine? And is there, because there's not like a supplement methadone
right.
treatment plan, I would say, in the same way it seems like there is for opioids.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So for opioids, we've got 2 fantastic medicines that are the gold standard of treatment. So Suboxone and Methadone. So relapse rates are incredibly high if your plan in the hospital is to just come off of opioids and stay off of them, not replace that with anything with any medication.
Cold turkey, yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't have those same medicines for other use disorders. So for alcohol, we have a few that we could offer. Everyone's heard of Antabuse, where you get sick if you drink while you're taking it. We don't really use that anymore. We have the 2 main medicines that we use would be naltrexone and acamprosate, which help decrease cravings for alcohol. But for every use disorder besides opioids, the other parts of treatment become that much more important. Things like any kind of rehab, whether that's inpatient or outpatient, things like group meetings. Everyone's heard of AA, but there's so many different types of meetings out there. I tell my patients, whatever kind of person you are, there is a group of you meeting outside somewhere talking about this. There's like Dharma Recovery here in Colorado, which has like, Buddhist inspired approach. There's like Pagans in Recovery. There's outdoor recovery groups. There's all sorts of things like that. And then we also talk to families about, it's hard to be a person with a use disorder, and it's hard to be a person that loves a person with a use disorder. And so having those resources to help family members know, like, how do you set appropriate boundaries with this person that you love so much, that you're seeing go through this much suffering? How do you support yourself? How do you support their kids? All those kinds of things. And then also thinking of mental health can be a huge factor in all of these things. So, some people with alcohol use disorder may drink partially because they've got really uncontrolled anxiety. So how do we hook them up with a therapist, with a psychiatrist that can help manage these underlying mental health diagnoses that may be contributing to their use disorder. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have those kind of like silver bullet medications, but we still do have a lot of supports that we can help hook people into.
Because I think it was when we were talking that you set it up in such a distinct way that really stuck out, which is why I thought of you immediately when I read this article, which is this idea of a shift in your thought process or the way you think about addiction as being a disease versus a moral failing. And in what you've learned as you've gained this specialty in addiction medicine, like how much of someone who, because we talk about an addictive personality. So how much is someone who has a use disorder is about their unique biology and, traits that they inherited from family members versus their environment?
Oh yeah, interesting question, because I don't think it has to be, I think they can both be true and they interact with each other. So there are certainly some use disorders that are more genetically linked than others. So for alcohol use disorder, if somebody has really severe alcohol use disorder, typically I'm guessing that somebody in their family does as well before I go see them. Whereas things like opioids, it's very much a chemical process in our brains that happens. And so all of us are more likely, if we abused alcohol versus opioids, we're all much more likely to end up with opioid use disorder than we would as a whole with alcohol use disorder. But I think thinking about genetics and your lived experience and kind of traumas that you've gone through, those can impact your genetics. Even, even when we're in the womb, there's something called epigenetics where our genome gets changed in some ways and how genes are expressed gets changed, and trauma that your mother goes through can impact how your genes are expressed, for example. And so much of it, there's some of it that's genetic. And then I think so much of it is also, what did you go through growing up? How many adverse childhood events did you go through? What kind of coping mechanisms did you grow up with? That did your parents teach you when you're feeling anxious or depressed or things like that? What kind of neighborhood did you grow up with? What kind of people were you surrounded with? What culture was that? And so, depending on your circumstance, that can have a huge impact on whether you end up on a substance or not. And like I said, some of these patients, it's like, man, so many awful things happened to you so young. And, your stepdad introduced you to alcohol when you were 13 and your father had a bad alcohol use disorder. Well, yeah, no wonder you ended up with the same thing, right? You can start out with that genetic link and end up with a lot of traumas on the way that make that more likely.
And when it comes to Wisconsin, you could also just live in Wisconsin.
There's a lot of alcohol there. That's true.
Yeah, exactly. And so, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us about what your specialty has looked like, what it looks like at your hospital, also what it seems like is available also in Wisconsin. But Dr. Scott Saunders, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Of course. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break for the top of the hour news. And when we come back, John Gerda will be here. Very much looking forward to that. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome. It's so fun.
Talk to you. Bye, guys. Yes. So you're great. I'll text you later.
Women hear a lot about self-care these days. Advice on ways to relax, exercise, eat healthy, and more. Those are all great. But one of the most important self-care steps we can take is making sure we're financially secure later in life. That means saving money for retirement. It's never too late to start. And it's the kind of self-care that brings peace of mind that lasts. For small steps you can take to save for retirement, visit WeSaySaveIt.org. That's WeSaySaveIt.org. A message from AARP and the Ad Council.
You've got questions about navigating the healthcare system? Kristen Lyerly helps us find answers and discusses other issues at the intersection of healthcare and politics. Hometown Health, Thursday mornings at 7:30 on Up North News Radio.
Dad, I picked up your pills, made your lunch, and your laundry is done.
When you care for a loved one, you take care of everything. But are you taking care of yourself? Find free care guides at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by
You are listening to WAUK 540 AM Jackson, W266 DR Waukesha, always streaming on the Civic Media app.
AP News. I'm Ed Donahue. The release of WNBA star Brittany Griner in exchange for an arms dealer in Russia means American Paul Whelan is still being held in Russia on espionage charges. The Biden administration was pushing for the release of both of them. This is White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
It was a choice between bringing home one American or bringing home none. And we brought one home today.
South Carolina women's basketball coach Dawn Staley is a friend of Griner. She told the AP the women's basketball movement made this release happen.
Not a whole lot of people could have handled that situation, but Brittany's strong. Brittany is one of us. And, I'm full. My heart is full knowing that she's coming home.
Paul Whelan's family says the Biden administration made the right decision by agreeing to the swap, but they're devastated Whelan remains behind. The House gave final approval to a bill protecting same-sex marriages. California Democrat Judy Chu says the idea behind the same-sex marriage bill comes after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade.
The Supreme Court's actions this summer have shown us that we cannot take our rights for granted. No one should have to live in fear that a Supreme Court decision could invalidate their marriage in the blink of an eye.
The House has passed a defense bill that would rescind a coronavirus vaccine mandate for service members. It now goes to the Senate, where it's expected to pass easily, and then to President Biden to be signed into law. Iran says it has executed a prisoner convicted for a crime allegedly committed during the country's ongoing nationwide protest. Nearly 66 years after the battered body of a young boy was found stuffed inside a cardboard box, Philadelphia police say they finally uncovered the boy's name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. The homicide investigation remains open, and authorities say they hope publicizing Joseph's name would spur a fresh round of leads. This is AP News.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's Medi-Share. Maybe you've heard switching to Medi-Share to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge. But it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for Medi-Share is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Medi-Share works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
Fear you may be missing out? We're always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app. Enjoy listening live or catch up by finding the podcast at civicmedia.us or wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.
So all you folks out there, if you haven't registered to vote, register to vote, get ready to vote. There are so many things on the ballot this November at our freedom, our liberty, and our way of life. But we'll get to all of that this evening.
The Paul Revere Show with Mark Thompson. Listen Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. on the Shaw 101 FM and WAUK 540 AM.
That must be Kristen.
27% of the American workforce, and some even say 30%.
Hello.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good. It's so good to meet you.
So you're in scenic downtown Waukesha.
Downtown Waukesha, looking at Wisconsin Avenue. It's
So
pretty
where are
nice
you-
down here.
Yeah, I know. So where are you from 6 Points?
We're 6 Points. I don't know.
That's the harder thing. This is where it all comes together.
Oh yeah, we're close. We're close to that. We're like right
parallel
off of Main Street. We're, I can basically see the Freeman from our office.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't know it was
Within
called
easy.
6 Points.
Yes. The old days. Dave Haynes was singing your praises, so I watched some of your videos. Nice job.
Oh, thank you. I know. And I'm going to probably mention that between George and David both leaving, those were like my two work dads.
Yeah.
And so in your article that you said that him retiring is also one of the reasons why you've like, maybe it's time to stop the column. I was like, Yeah, I hear that because he is a delight to work with.
Yeah, he is. He's easy. Kind of lets me do what I want.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we'll come back in just a minute, and then the first segment goes to 1:16, 1:17, and then we'll have a commercial, and we'll come back for another 8 minutes.
Okay, good.
All right, great.
In that time, sheriff's deputies in Illinois say Michael Liu broke into his in-laws' home and shot at them and stabbed them several times. Doro's Wisconsin Supreme Court campaign says most judges actually give abuse convicts more time to report to jail. Wisconsin taxpayers will likely have to pay state taxes on any student loan debt forgiven. Some tax professionals are telling people to report loan forgiveness as income, even if they don't get a 1099-C form from their loan servicer. In sports, the Bucks beat Sacramento last night. College volleyball Sweet 16 played today. Wisconsin host Penn State, and Marquette takes on top-seeded Texas. You're listening to The Shaw, 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM.
As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry is an independent product and has a joint sales agreement with Civic Media. Enjoy.
See the moon moving along the sky. It's a car moving along the highway. You moving to California with me. I'm almost 2,000 miles from my home, sweet home, and 2,000 miles from the arms that bore me. 2,000 miles from my sweet home, Milwaukee.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristen Bry. A reminder, if you like our show, tell your friends. We are a growing show on a growing network, and we could use your help spreading the word. And so I am so excited for our next guest. He is the Milwaukee historian, John Gerda, because he has been the go-to source for all things Milwaukee history. He has published 22 books on the city's history, including Milwaukee, A City of Neighborhoods, Cream City Chronicles, The Making of Milwaukee, his latest book, Brewtown Tales. And I also found out this week, I didn't know that you were a regular on Around the Corner with John McGivern, but we also had John McGivern on this week. And so both Johns 1 week. And as of last week, after 29 years, you're hanging up the column in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to get you on the show. Welcome, John Gerda.
Thanks for having me. So you've had John McGivern on. Lois Maurer, who was our producer for Around the Corner, she said, Shaw said, 2 Johns, no waiting.
How much fun was it to do that show with him?
It was a lot of fun. I was front loaded. I would do all the research beforehand, and early on we began to have kind of spontaneous conversations, and there was a lot of sort of dead air. What. So what happened was I scripted it. So I had to memorize it, and then John he would have to memorize the cues. Kind of the outros, and then he figured out that he had his cell phone. He could put the questions on there and say, "Oh, and what was the population at that time?" So it became a lot easier for both of us, and a lot more seamless. And it was fun. We would do maybe 2 takes, sometimes 3, wherever we were for 9 years. So it's 13, 115 shows, something like that. But then for me, a real pleasure of that job was when I was through taping with John and Lois. I would go biking, so it was all around the state, from Ashland down to the southwest corner to, around the Milwaukee area. So I got to see a lot of the state, and I'm as much a Wisconsinite as I am a Milwaukeean. So that was a real pleasure.
Yeah. And that's because I listened to one of your interviews, I think from a couple years ago with WPR after you had done a Milwaukee Magazine interview. And so your mother's from the Driftless region, right?
Yeah,
near the La Crosse. So you really, as much as you are known for Milwaukee, have gotten to do history about all across the state.
No, I'm bi-coastal. My dad's Polish from the south side of Milwaukee, so I'm on Lake Michigan, and my mom was from the Driftless around Coon Valley, Wisconsin, near the Mississippi. So I kind of touch both sides of the state.
Absolutely. So there's so many different ways I want to take this conversation, but so you're hanging up the column for now after 29 years, but this isn't retirement, right?
Oh, no. I've been getting all kinds of retirement. I got a call this morning from a county supervisor saying we want to do a citation for you retiring. And I had to explain to him that I'm not retiring. No, the Journal Sentinel gig, that was 2 days a month. So, as you know, as another freelancer, you kind of patch together a living for all these years. So I'll keep writing. We just had a Jones Island documentary that was premiered on Milwaukee PBS. The Brewtown Tales book is out. Working on a series of tours, publishing the tours of Milwaukee, doing a lecture series. We can get it together kind of about Black history in Milwaukee. So I've got a lot of things I need doing. So I had to tell the supervisor, thank you very much. I much appreciate the thought, but a little premature.
A little premature. Well, and to say what you just said, as far as you've made a career out of being a historian. And when you went and got your master's from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, because you were an English major for your undergrad, correct?
Right. Yep.
And then you went and got your master's in history. And so did you think that you could be a historian and not have to be a professor?
No, not at all. Especially with a master's degree, and that's as far as I got. And I didn't want to go any farther. I was working, and I kind of wanted to get back out, kind of in the world and writing. So I was never tempted by academia. But no, it's been 50 years. Back in 72 was when I first kind of went freelance. And to think that I've been able to do this all these years is my mom would be shocked. Whenever there'd be somebody retiring from the Journal, which is our paper before they merged back in '95, she would say, I see Gerald Kloss is hanging it up. Maybe you should talk to those people. She could never believe, that this could be a career. And fortunately, I have a patient wife, Sonia, who she tells people, she would ask sometimes what my backup plan was. There was no backup plan. No, there was no other net.
So have you always just kind of trusted the process of knowing that there was going to be another book or another TV show or a column, or just kind of knowing that by being the kind of expert on Milwaukee's history of where we've been and potentially how that can inform where we're going, that you just trusted that there was going to be opportunities to continue to write and talk about that?
Basically followed my nose. And there was no inside to come to. So actually, a lot of what made this career possible, is I would do commission work for nonprofits and for businesses, so that pays a whole lot better than freelance work, as you know. So I've done histories of Miller Brewing, Northwestern Mutual twice. So repeat business, 25 years apart. I did 2 books on Northwestern Mutual, Laddish, We Energies, Harnischfeger, which is, kind of reincarnated as Komatsu. So I would write these book length, histories of these companies, as well as Forest Home Cemetery, Manual Presbyterian Church, Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church, Frank Lloyd Wright. So I got to hang around to Taliesin. So over the years, I've gotten to visit a whole lot of different worlds, and kind of, someone described as building little houses by the roadside, so kind of pass those and say, oh yeah, I worked on that one. So those commission jobs, were essential to me being able to kind of fund, the more community oriented sorts of things. And over time, developed enough, enough body of work and enough contacts so I could raise money for things like the Making of Milwaukee or City of Neighborhoods, or most recently the Jones Island documentary. So yeah, it's been. I've always said that. Recently said, that if I were to write a memoir, it would be 50 years of 1099s. I have not had a W-2 since 1972.
Wow, that is incredible. We're talking to Milwaukee historian and writer John Gurda about all things of his career, but also Milwaukee. And so, do you feel like there's still more things for you to learn about Milwaukee?
Oh, sure. Or at least ways to package it.
Okay.
The TV is more interesting to me lately than writing. I just did a show called People of the Port for Milwaukee PBS. It just premiered last week. And that was a half-hour look at just a fascinating slice of real estate in Milwaukee. Everything from the largest Indian village in Milwaukee to, for 50 years, a Polish fishing village. So there are those stories to tell. And yes, I'm always learning stuff. Just yesterday, I was looking for something else. I do a back page thing for Milwaukee Magazine. I take a historic photograph and do a 300-word essay. And I was looking for something else and came across this half-page story about the Menominee Valley from 1898, which I'd never seen before. And they're talking about, people searching through the piles of refuse for tin to scrap, and the jubilant cry of the factory whistle at quitting time, and the tin pail crowd that kind of streams out of the valley. So yeah, there's always stuff. We're always making more history. So the mine is inexhaustible.
Well, John, now that you're stepping away from your column, but you're not retiring. Like many other reporters in Milwaukee, whenever something came up about the history, it's like, call Gerda. We need to talk to John Gerda because you're the
I still
expert.
answer my phone.
You do. So
Oh, sure.
reporters can still continue to bother you as time goes on.
Yeah, people are not reluctant. So,
And I said this before, John, and I mean this sincerely, that Making in Milwaukee is one of my favorite books in the world. I've given it as a
Oh,
Christmas
thank you.
present many, many, many times. And the series as well is wonderful.
yeah, we're now in the 4th edition. So it's
Wow.
it's update. Yep.
So as far as if you had to pick, what was the golden era of Milwaukee?
There is no
In
golden
your
era.
there is no golden
There is no
era.
golden era. Nope. There are no golden days. There are no good old days. I said to my kids when they were growing up, they complain about whether it was adolescence or they're 5 years old. There is something good and something bad about every single age. Whether you're 7 months or 7 decades. And the same thing's true about a city's history. So you think about the good old days of the 1890s when life was more carefree and we cared about each other and we walked everywhere. Look at the river, how polluted it was. Look at the coal smoke that kind of settled this pall over the entire city. So it's always, it's human life is yin yang. It's always this mixture of darkness and light. So there is no golden period I would look back to as kind of this is where Milwaukee got it, and we should all go back there. It's not the way life
That's
works.
not the way the world works. But as far as pivotal moments, as far as like the timeline, and maybe even just of the last century, like what do you think the biggest shifts have been in the city politically, or kind of like the milestones that we've hit that we should all kind of like keep in mind as we try to continue to improve on the city?
The biggest pivot is 1910 when socialists won the mayor's office and a majority of common council seats. And that ended a period of graft, corruption, and just, downright self-dealing. Milwaukee was just as dirty as Chicago on a bad day. So it was, Milwaukee really was. I have a talk called How the Socialists Saved Milwaukee. Yeah, they really did. Now it's become kind of the S word, except for Bernie, kind of American politics. But they were excellent governors. And what animated them, what motivated them was concern for the public good. Public enterprise, was the kind of the term they constantly used. So, Dan Holm got his picture on the cover of Time magazine back in 1936, Milwaukee's mayor from 16 to 40. And Time called Milwaukee perhaps the best governed city in the U.S. So these guys knew what they were doing. And there were women too, but it was largely guys back then. So 1910's a pivot. And there are certainly, that heritage. Frank Zeidler stepped down in 1960. So it's quite a while ago now. But for most of 50 years, we had socialist mayors. And I've argued that that's kind of part of Milwaukee's civic subconscious. It's still there. It's threatened. It's fragile, but it's still there. That kind of that mutualism, the kind of concern for the common good, I think is still a part of our DNA. Other pivots, certainly one huge one was that period from 79 to 83 when we lost a quarter of our manufacturing jobs. And that was, certainly other cities were harder hit, but that had a huge impact, especially on Milwaukee's minority community. In the 50s, actually until about 1970, black workers had a higher proportion of production jobs than white workers. And that meant union jobs in a union town. So you had people joining the middle class, and then just the ladders kind of pulled out from under them with that deindustrialization. So that's a big shift.
Absolutely. All right. Well, when we come back, I actually want to talk about some of the historical women of Milwaukee.
Okay, sure.
Our guest for this half hour is historian John Gerda. Stay with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Get yourself together.
Can we talk or not?
Oh, this is so fun.
Oh, good. Likewise.
So actually, because I wasn't even planning on asking you that, but then you said how it was mostly men. I think coming back into some of the women that have stood out as far as Milwaukee's history would be a fun question. And then I definitely want to give a chance to talk about Brewtown Tales, because I love at the end of your column how you talk about where locally you can buy it. So we can talk about some of the stories and essays that are in there. And then Anything? Jane, do you have more questions?
I'm curious, John. Over the course of all your years, there must have been someone who you thought was going to be a great interview and just turned out not to be. Not that I want you to throw anybody under the bus, but
maybe. If you're willing to, maybe Jane does.
I've done enough interviews over the years, and I've had some that were just horrible.
We can do best and worst.
Want to do it on air?
Yeah, we'll do it on air.
I can do best and worst. Oh yeah.
All right, perfect. So we'll do those three when we come back.
Okay.
It's 4 a.m. and you're sucking baby snot through a tube because she's congested. If you love her that much, love her enough to make sure she's buckled in the right car seat. Find out more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Missed your favorite show live on air? It's easy to find what you enjoy wherever you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And we're always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app.
Here's your updated forecast on the Shaw. High temperatures reach up to 37 this afternoon under cloudy skies. Winds out of the east, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Cloudy skies expected again tonight. Lows around 30. Cloudy skies expected tomorrow. A mixture of precipitation likely. Daytime highs approaching 33. 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow through tomorrow night. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Eric Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
The Shaw 101 FM, your fix for progressive talk. From Muskego to Pewaukee. Always streaming at WAUKradio.com.
Well, I left Atlanta one morning for a day. The brakeman said you'll have to pay. I've got no money but upon my shoes. I gotta go west, I got the Milwaukee Blues.
Well, welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. Our guest this half hour is historian John Gerda, who is the go-to source for all things Milwaukee history. And in the previous segment, before the commercial, we were talking about some of the mayors and men who have shaped Milwaukee. But who were some of the women that are notable historical figures that helped Milwaukee be what it is?
Two heroines of mine are part of the Jewish community, and they are Golda Meir and Lizzie Kander. And Golda, obviously, she was Prime Minister of Israel, so she's a big deal. Got lots of things named after her here. But she grew up here. She came here at the age of 8 and stayed until she was in her 20s. So her formative years were spent here in Milwaukee. And she was very active in both the Zionist and the socialist circles here in Milwaukee. So she was part of that sort of that ferment back in the first decades of the 20th century. So certainly she was a heroine. And then Lizzie Black Kander was someone of German Jewish background. And there was kind of a gulf between the Eastern Europeans who came here back in the 1880s, who were kind of the great unwashed, kind of is how they were sometimes stereotyped. And she was affluent, kind of from the German side, the assimilated side, and she ended up opening something called the Settlement, which was like Jane Addams' Hull House in Chicago, come one, come all, and for everything from Yiddish newspapers to a savings bank to a library branch. And that became the Jewish Community Center. And to raise money for her settlement, she taught cooking classes, and she would put the right ingredients, very easy to follow. And the result was a settlement cookbook, which sold, well over 1 million copies. And I think it's no longer in print, but that was a really big deal. So Lizzie and Golda are really, very, very prominent figures in Milwaukee's history on the women in Milwaukee. Maida Berger, who was the wife of Victor Berger, who was a socialist stalwart here. She was very active in her own right. And going way back, Josette Juneau, who was Solomon's wife. She was part Menominee by ancestry, and even though it meant the city was not the fledgling city was being transformed before her very eyes, she acted as a midwife. She was kind of a hostess, for the early Europeans who came in. So she was a towering figure as well. So there is representation, not as egalitarian as it should be, but there's certainly some notable women in Milwaukee's past.
Yeah, absolutely.
John, you've done a lot of interviews over the years. I've done a lot of interviews over the years. I've had some real clunkers from people who you expect are going to be wonderful. Has there ever been one where you were just like, this did not turn out like I hoped that it would?
Oh, yeah. Aside from the ones who give one-word answers, kind of yes, I don't know. That's just so you're thinking a half hour on your 5 minutes and you're done. I did a book about Bayview called Bayview, Wisconsin back in 1979. And what I would do is a lot of interviews with politicians and clergy, people who you would expect to know the community well. And I was doing an interview with the pastor, a post-lunch interview with the pastor of Bayview's biggest Catholic church. And there was kind of a lull in the conversation, and he's nodding, and he's nodding, and he fell asleep.
That was to really
Did you shake him?
reinforce your confidence as an interviewer, right?
Boy, did I feel stimulating.
Oh my gosh!
I think I cleared my throat, or kind of dropped my pen, or something like that. Turn off the tape recorder really loud. He kind of sort of came to. I won't provide his name, but people in Bayview.
People may be able to figure it out.
Right.
So your newest book, Brewtown Tales, More Stories from Milwaukee and Beyond, is out now. But what are some of the highlights of some of your favorite stories that are included in the new book?
These are largely Journal Sentinel columns, but not only. Included a story I did for Milwaukee Magazine about my years as a barfly on Milwaukee's South Side at Big John's Tap, which is one of my favorite pieces in there. But there are 80 essays, largely bite-sized. They run, 1,200, 1,500 words through there. Some of the favorite ones, it's interesting. Some of my favorite ones are not so much historical, but one is a trip I took on Highway 12, coming from around the corner. We're shooting around the corner in Eau Claire, and I was going to bike, but it was raining, so I took Highway 12 instead of 94, and just sort of fell in love with this sort of slow road home that you can duplicate, any place else in Wisconsin. That's a favorite one. I've done that at readings. Another was the safer inside was the jargon, the motto when COVID first hit. So saner inside, certainly, but I did safer inside, and I did a column called Saner Outside, which was kind of a description of following the progress of the spring of 2020. And that was a chance to really observe nature closely and to kind of get it down in writing. So those are two favorites. But then there's one called A Socialist Citadel, which kind of describes the backstory of Milwaukee socialism. Certainly essays about segregation in Milwaukee, about Black Lives Matter in Milwaukee, so things that are topical as well. So it doesn't lack for variety.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably, as long with some of the other ones, might be Christmas gifts this year. And I appreciated that if you want to not necessarily make Jeff Bezos richer, but want to keep your purchase in the Wisconsin economy, you can buy it at shop.wisconsinhistory.org/Brewtown Tales, because it was Wisconsin Historical Society Press that published it, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
And
so
that's a great building to visit too, the Wisconsin Historical Society.
Oh, it is, yeah. Right across from the Union.
Everything that they do, I'm so constantly impressed and happy that we have the Wisconsin Historical Society and John Gerda, because you are not retiring. So now that you've made your debut on this show, I'm sure there's going to be many, many opportunities where we're like, let's get John on the show. He can explain this to us. So thank you so much for joining us today. We will link the Jones Island PBS documentary and the new books and your website on our website for today's blog post. John Gerda, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
My pleasure, Kristen, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, what would you do if you couldn't take a 2-hour flight and you had to take a train? Would you protest? I'm surprised the French aren't protesting, because that's what's happening there. All right. Stay with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Put all their trust in the hands of God.
Good music. Thank you, Kristen.
The Shaw 101 FM, Brookfield's choice for news talk radio. Streaming 24/7 at WAUKradio.com.
Women hear a lot about self-care these days. Advice on ways to relax, exercise, eat healthy, and more. Those are all great. But one of the most important self-care steps we can take is making sure we're financially secure later in life. That means saving money for retirement. It's never too late to start, and it's the kind of self-care that brings peace of mind that lasts. For small steps you can take to save for retirement, visit WeSaySaveIt.org. That's WeSaySaveIt.org. A message from AARP and the Ad Council.
Dueling Tangents with Luke and Brian.
I'm really trying hard not to go insane from the mind screw that is this situation with the I was going to say the GAB, but now it's the WEC, which was audited by the LAB, and then it's now screwed up by the GOP, and we're all SOL. Good for us. Congratulations.
Look at all those acronyms. Yeah.
We're the winners.
Tune in for Dueling Tangents.
I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. The Federal Trade Commission is suing to block Microsoft's $69 billion takeover of video game company Activision Blizzard. A judge unsealed a dropped bomb threat case against the California gay bar shooting suspect a year before allegedly killing 5 people. Here's the AP's Jackie Quinn.
The lawyers for Anderson Aldridge, who identifies as non-binary, say the suspect won't be able to get a fair trial in the nightclub killings because of these documents about violent threats Anderson allegedly made to family members. It was June of last year. Grandparents were allegedly threatened with a loaded gun and told they were going to die. The case was dropped for unknown reasons and the documents sealed until the media fought to have them made public.
Documents describe Aldridge telling frightened grandparents of firearms and bomb-making material in their basement, vowing not to allow them to interfere in plans to kill on a mass scale. I'm Ed Donahue.
Paid for by Christian Care Ministry.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's Medi-Share. Maybe you've heard switching to Medi-Share to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month. And that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for Medi-Share is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Medi-Share works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 855-51-BIBLE. That's 855-51-BIBLE. 855-51-BIBLE.
For Civic Media, I'm Jane Matnier with your headlines. It's been a good year for Wisconsin, the state dipping below 3% unemployment in the last 12 months, the current rate 3.3%, but a worker shortage still projected in the coming years. Amy Pekacek, Secretary-designee for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, tells the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel there are roughly 2 job openings for every job seeker in the state, so Wisconsin trying to re-engage people who've been out of the workforce for a number of reasons, including incarceration. There are currently 10 job centers and correctional facilities helping inmates get employment once they're released. Richland Center community members frustrated with the proposed closing of the UW Richland campus. Supporters say some of the reasons for declining enrollment are due to the UW system's lack of financial support, drastic reductions in faculty and staff, and no marketing or strategic plans. They'll forward a petition to Governor Evers, UW system president Jay Rothman, and area lawmakers. You're listening to The Shaw, 101 FM, WAUK, 540 AM.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. No matter where you're listening across the Civic Media Network or on the Civic Media app or on a podcast later today or later this week, maybe this weekend. Thanks for tuning in. And if you miss any part of today's show, you can always go back and listen to it as a podcast. And so you can find that on asgoeswisconsin.com /podcasts.
Newly revamped.
Yeah, I was with my person yesterday. And so we were doing a little bit of a facelift to the website. You can also find us on Apple and Spotify and the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us. Lots of ways to listen and follow us on social media because, you know, we're still posting stuff that's beyond just the live stream of this show. I'm still doing some TikToks and some short videos, though not as many as I'd like to be doing. But, you know, we're still just plugging along every day. And, you know, it was so interesting talking to John who is not retiring, John Gerda, historian, and not retiring, but hanging up the column, the Journal Sentinel column. And one of the reasons I do love if you go read his kind of farewell that was published last week in Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. One of the reasons he subtly lists as to why he's not doing it anymore is how much they didn't pay him. They did pay him, but it was like, as you referenced, the freelance, the per word, per article.
Not a big moneymaker.
Not a big moneymaker, but he also lists that the Ideas Lab, David Haynes, the Ideas Lab editor, David Haynes, is retiring, who is my boss over there. And also announced this week, George Stanley is retiring, who is the editor-in-chief and has been since 2015, but he has worked for the paper for 43 years. And, while Jane is definitely my work mom / work wife, which is a little weird and incestuous, but whatever. Those two, and the time that the little over a year I've spent at Journal Sentinel doing the videos, the video columns that I do over there, certainly both of those men have been my work dads. And I'm pretty sad. I get it. I get that they're both are of the age, or they have kids that they want to spend more time with, and grandkids they want to spend more time with. But they are the institutional knowledge that they have, and the amount of time before I actually started, and it was still kind of like, all right, well, we like what you do, but we don't know how to fit you into the newsroom.
What to do?
We don't know what to do with you. And I had coffee with George at the Red Arrow Starbucks, and I think we must have just sat there for like 3 hours just talking. And so to both of those men, how many stories they have in their back pocket because they lived it, right? They lived reporting the politics and the businesses and the Tommy Thompsons and all of the ways that Wisconsin has shifted and changed in their career, and they were responsible for reporting on it. And so just getting to sit and talk with them, especially because I was gone for a while. And so even stuff in more recent history that I, now doing the jobs that I do, have to go up and research and read about, instead of, and having them though, to just kind of explain it.
And put it into context.
And to put it into context has been wildly valuable for me. And I think very valuable for everyone who works at Journal Sentinel. And so certainly big shoes to fill.
Well, I hope both John and David realize that reporters all over southeastern Wisconsin are going to go call Stanley, because we need background on something. And so they're not going to be off the hook. They might not be as willing to pick up the phone as the lovely John Gerda, but I'm sure there are going to be people reaching out to them, because, as you said, the institutional knowledge that they have and the context in which they can put things is invaluable.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a reminder, especially in something like a newsroom, that David will say, for years, decades, nothing changed in the newsroom. Everything, the grind of the paper was the grind of the paper. But as far as the changing evolution of how we do the paper for decades was the same. Yes. And then in the last 12 years, it changes all the time.
It just blew up.
And, the double-edged sword of digital and everything that means, and what that's done to newspapers, for better or for worse, but the need to keep up with the times as far as how social media changes and SEO and all these things, of how people, as the readers, get their information and get their news, and how, as the paper, you're responsible for not only doing good reporting, which Milwaukee Journal Sentinel does do very good reporting. Like the journalists who are employed there, I've learned so much from them. But it's also the distribution of it that takes a whole different skill set and team to be able to do something beyond print to paper and keep up with how things are changing. That is a completely different skill set than reporting the news.
Yeah, there's no question. And I do want to just emphasize, and there's so much hate against the media right now, but having a hometown-based newspaper is critically important for that hometown. You might not think it is, But without someone to keep an eye on our politicians and our boards and all of those things, there's all kinds of hanky-panky that can get up to.
Well, and I think about that, so much of what we do on this show is editorialize the reporting that actual journalists are doing, right? And it's between Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, WPR, Wisconsin State Journal, and the local journalists that we have that do such a good job that, doing a 3-hour radio show doesn't leave a lot of time for me to go find like stories firsthand. So a lot of it is being able to rely on the reporting that they do and break it down in a different way, offer my opinion on it, provided a firsthand radio interview of some of the people that they, but a lot of times our guests that we invite on, it's because I read about them in a different person's report. Yes. And so I know that sometimes Gannett as a, published and as an entity, there's a lot of valid criticism that you can direct towards Gannett and how much money their executives make versus rounds of cuts and the conglomerate of gobbling up newspapers,
little independent
newspapers and stuff. But as far as, at least I can certainly say firsthand that the work that Journal Sentinel is doing and the reporting that they do is a reflection of them, regardless of how you feel about Gannett. And certainly you should subscribe to them. And every time you hit that paywall, I know it's annoying, but there's always deals as far as, $1 a month for 6 months and entry deals to get you in the door, because supporting local media is really, really important.
The investigative reporting that they do is award-winning.
I mean,
is groundbreaking. And I can think of some stories before you even got here about daycare centers that were set up that actually didn't have any enrollees that were getting paid by the state. I mean, they've done numerous long form, the PFAS piece that they just did.
They almost won a Pulitzer in this last year. They were nominated for the landlord fire, like the fires in the rental units. And who won was Washington Post for the January 6th reporting. But continuously, the reporting that comes out of Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is excellent, and that is a reflection, I would say, on the respect and passion that George Stanley has for journalism. And so we're going to get him on the show. I told him what he announced this week. I pinged him and I said, well, can I interview you? He goes, well, now everyone's pinging me to try to get me on the show. I was like, well, we'll do that for the holidays once you get through, because I think it's right at the end of the year that he's going to step down. David Haynes is stepping down next week. So my life's going to be very different over there.
Missing your two work dads.
My two work dads. But yeah, so if you do not subscribe to any of the USA Today Wisconsin papers, I highly recommend doing so, because they do a very good job and you should support local media.
And we need them.
So this caught my eye. Switching gears, this caught my eye because I feel like, this certainly wouldn't work in the U.S. But I'm just trying to imagine, as much as we rely on the convenience of things, but could you imagine the riots if Congress passed a new law saying you no longer can take a flight if it's under 2 hours?
So I can't fly Milwaukee to Minneapolis. I have to drive Milwaukee.
Well, no, you'd have to take a train. And the reason why this would not work is because we don't do our train system past the East Coast is not that comprehensive.
We're not set up for that.
But in France, they just got the go-ahead to start doing this. And so France, earlier this week, the European Commission allowed the country to chug along with its short-haul domestic flight ban. So basically, only air routes with a reliable train alternative that takes less than 2.5 hours will be cut. So basically, if there is a train that can take you from Paris to Lyon or Paris to Marseille, although I don't know if Paris to Marseille France is a much smaller
geographically,
a much smaller country than us. So trying to imagine
what would be more than 2.5.
What is more than 2.5 hours on a flight? But I saw this, and I like the times that I take trains. They're great. And honestly, a lot of times when you think about I've thought about this a lot when I lived in San Francisco or LA, and there is no train connecting those two, the two major cities in California. They've tried, but there's, the high speed rail that they've tried to push through just hasn't happened. And sometimes I would argue the drive itself is about, depending how fast you drive on the 5, and if there's an accident or not, it's like 6-ish hours. So
cruise.
It's a drive versus a very short plane ride. But sometimes when you think about getting to the plane in time, and because there were certainly times where that flight would be delayed like 2 hours, and you're like, well, at the time I got to the airport, I waited for my flight, I did the flight, I got off, and then drove to wherever I needed to go in LA, because God knows the traffic there is a mess. And you're like, well, how much time did I actually save?
Maybe 20 minutes.
And so, but I'm just trying to think, Americans losing their mind. Like if you couldn't fly from like Philly to Washington, D.C., or DC to New York, or even Boston to New York, and all these kind of like short puddle jumper flights. And this doesn't even include private jets. This is just short commercial flights. I do not think this would fly, pun intended, in the US.
Well, and I'm surprised because the French really don't seem to have too many problems with going on strike.
Oh no,
Right?
This is a country that loves to protest.
They kind of like this, can you hear the songs of angry riders? Well, so I'm surprised that they're not really. Is this an environmental consideration?
It is.
Okay.
And so, but I think the criticism is, does this really make enough of a dent to be worth the inconvenience of it? But they're not stopping there. The transport minister, Clement Bon.
I'm sorry, who?
So the funny thing about this is, before Mike, in my last relationship, it was a Frenchman from the south of France, from Aix-en-Provence. And in that relationship, I took multiple at Duolingo. I tried to take multiple French classes. It really didn't stick. And so reading this article and trying to pronounce the things was like, Clement Bon?
Say it really fast.
Clement Bon.
Parfait.
He also wants to slap taxes and restrictions on private jets to reduce the use of those gas guzzling transportation devices. And so it'll be interesting. I mean, they're certainly taking a lead on this. And I don't know if it would stick in America. I think there would be a lot of people very upset if they couldn't take their private jets or a 30-minute flight from Milwaukee to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, when we come back, we still have one more segment. We're going to talk to Vicky Paschal, which I have to figure out if that's how to pronounce her name, about the Castle family Christmas in Wautoma. Stick with us.
This is Pat Greitlow from Up North News Radio. On the air, online, or on demand, make it a point to catch the first word on Wisconsin news, sports, and more weekday mornings from 6 to 8.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? How do you pronounce your last name? Because I realized I've been trying to say it. I was like, I'm butchering this.
Peschel.
Peschel?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. It's not Pochel. Peschel.
Nope.
And then, is it Brooks? Macomb Brooks?
Macomb Brooks.
Brooks. Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Good thing I asked.
Yes.
Well, great. So we have a couple minutes for the commercial break, but then we'll come back and I'll welcome people back to the show. And then I'll set up that we're promoting different holiday shows that are happening. And then I'll let you talk about what's happening on Saturday.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
She turned herself into a great mathematician. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help.
Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You are listening to your local Civic Media radio station on air. Thank you. Did you know we are always streaming on TuneIn and the Civic Media app too? And if you miss a show or game, find it wherever you get your podcasts or on our website, civicmedia.us.
Here's your updated forecast on the Shaw. Cloudy skies this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 37. Winds out of the east 5 to 10 miles an hour. Lows dip down to about 30 tonight. Overcast skies. Overcast skies again tomorrow. Mixed precipitation likely. High temperatures reach up to 34. 2 to 4 inches of snow tomorrow. For Civic Media, I'm meteorologist Derek Height. Currently, it's 34 degrees.
The Shaw 101 FM, WAUK 540 AM, Waukesha's only news talk station.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin on the Civic Media Network. Reminder that we love hearing from you. If you have a topic that you think we should cover or an idea for a guest we should have on or any feedback for us, you can always email us at asgoeswisconsin@civicmedia.us. And one of the things we're trying to do throughout December is highlight different community programming, shows, holiday concerts that are happening across the state because it is such a fun time of year to see live shows. And so today we have the executive director at the Macomb Brooks PAC in Watoma to talk about a show that's happening this Saturday. Welcome, Vicki Pichelle.
Oh, thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Yes. And so is that Watoma behind you?
It is not. That's Wapaka.
That's Wapaka.
But it's
okay.
the closest I could find for this. But yeah, that's the Chena Lakes in Wapaka, and that's the Chief Wapaka in the background.
There you go. All right. Well, so what can people look forward to this weekend?
Well, on Saturday, December 10th at 7 o'clock, we have the Cowsills Family Christmas. And the Cowsills are a group that started in the 1960s, and they were a family. And there are like 6 or 7 little kids in the group and their mom. And they were the model for the Partridge Family TV show back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you have all these little kids and their mom, and they start singing these songs, and they had some hits. And you're probably way too young, Kristen, but honestly, there's Hair from the musical. They did that. They did this really cool song called Indian Lake, which I remember when I was a little kid, and I can see Jane going, yeah.
I remember this so well.
Yeah. And they have another one that's like one of my favorites. And I didn't know they did this until I went on YouTube and I looked at some of their stuff, but it's called The Rain, the Park, and Other Things. And it's about the flower girl. I love the flower girl, you know, But anyway, you got to go to YouTube because I'm not going to sing it. But they're going to do some of those things. And then also Christmas songs. They've been down in Branson at the Andy Williams Moon River Theater. And they've been there for a month doing Christmas shows. So they're going to pack up, come on up here and do a Christmas show in Watoma.
Vicki, for people who don't know, I mean, before there were the Osmonds and before there were the Jackson 5, it was the Cowsills.
There were the Cowsills, yeah. Yeah. And if you go on YouTube and see these pictures, it's like there are all these little kids. Susan is still in the group, and she was like 7 when she joined the group. And so you can see her with her little tambourine. And she's still in the group. I think there are 3 of the original members in the group. But then they've got kids, I believe, and Susan's husband is the drummer. So it's very much a family affair.
So the original group in the 60s, they were all siblings. And so so now 3 of the siblings are still part of it, but they've included their kids or husbands or wives to be a part of the group. And so how many people perform?
I think 5, maybe 5 or 6.
That's so fun. And so it's a mix of the classics, their classics, and then also Christmas music.
Yeah. Right.
Did the
so
sister?
It'll be fun. And we're going to have an ugly Christmas sweater contest too. So people who are coming are encouraged to wear their ugly Christmas sweater, and we're going to have a prize for the ugliest.
So how do you judge a criteria? What's your criteria for the who gets to decide what is the ugliest Christmas sweater?
Well, maybe that's a good question, but I'm going to be the judge, so I get to do that.
Send your bribes to Vicky.
Yes.
Do you have an ugly Christmas sweater to wear?
Oh, I do. Are you going
to spoil it for us, or do you need to have it be a surprise?
Oh, well, I can describe it.
Okay.
It is very, very much vintage. It looks like something Grammy used to wear like 40 years ago. It's got the Santa, it's got the tree, it's got the reindeer, it's got holly berries on it, and I mean, it's got everything going.
It's got it's loud. It's a loud sweater.
Yeah, it's gaudy.
Vicky, what else is coming up at the center? Into December and even into next year.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. We've got we take a break in January, so we don't come back until February. But Sunday, February 19th at 3:00, we have Roll On, a tribute to Alabama. So it's a group out of Minnesota, and they do all the Alabama hits. So that'll be fun.
So is most of the programming that you guys have at the McComb Brooks is it mostly concerts, or is it also sometimes plays and musicals?
We do mostly music, but we have had plays and shows like that. They're just a little harder to find for our venue. We don't have an in-house group of people who perform, so it's a little harder for us to find them. But what also makes us as unique is we're connected to the school. So we also do educational things out of the theater. So we have programs for like all the county schools in fall and in spring. So invite them to be part of the performing arts. And then also we have a summer theater, and the Prairie Fire Children's Theater they come from Minnesota, and they're in residence for a week, and they help our community kids. And this year we're going to put on Jack and the Beanstalk.
Oh, fun. That's so great.
It's so important. It's so important to have an arts facility like yours in a community like Wautoma.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's really unique, and it's been there 30 years, and the history is kind of cool behind it too. The donations came from two ladies in Wautoma, and they gave the money to build a theater. Two ladies.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's so great. Well, where can people find, if people are interested in any of the future shows or in this Saturday's show, where can they get more information to get tickets?
McCombbrooksPAC.com, or you can call our box office. It's 920-787-2189. We are there this week from 10 to 2 every day. And then before the show, we get there at 3. We do have tickets available. So if you want to do something Saturday, come on up.
But we have our Christmas party, our Civic Media Christmas party, but otherwise, I might be tempted to have my first Cowsill family Christmas debut and listen to their show, because it sounds like it's a really fun show.
And Wautoma is a great place. I mean, you can come there. We've got 2 really, really great supper clubs. I know people are into that. So you can go, like if you were going to come to the Roll On show, that's a matinee show. So then you can go out to a supper club after that. We have Silvercrest and the Moose Inn. They're both awesome. And you can stay at Borders and, have a nice little time away.
Have a nice little Wautoma night. All right. Well, thank you so much, Vicky, for joining us today. We will link all the information of how you can see the Cowsills Family Christmas in our episode blog at asgoeswisconsin.com. And that'll about do it for us today. We'll come back tomorrow, Friday, TGIF. And we're almost halfway through December already. That's like crazy. All right. Well, stick around for Dueling Tangents with Luke and Brian or the Chad Holmes Show, and come back tomorrow when we'll do it all again. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Wouldn't have to go away.